Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys. Sawadee Krap. Today is our first day of our course, Experiencing the Jhanas and the 4 Stages of Enlightenment. This is where you're going to be learning the details that you need in order to be able to get into the jhanas and start moving into the first stage of enlightenment. And then in January, we have a retreat that is everything that you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And all these courses are building to help you learn the wisdom that you need to be able to train your mind and get to this enlightened mental state. So welcome to all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time, maybe it's your first time studying with me, or maybe you've been studying for a period of time and this is the next part of your journey to learning. So welcome to everyone, those of you guys that are here and anyone who's joining online as well. The way we're going to start our class is with a meditation to be able to train your mind and kind of start your learning already with meditation. And then afterwards, I'm going to go into describing the course for you and kind of help you understand what you're going to be learning throughout the week. Then the bulk of the morning, we're going to be spending our time learning the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha. It's the path to enlightenment. If you were interested in making any kind of progress on your journey to enlightenment, you would need to start with the Eightfold Path. So we're going to be starting with that. Using the original words of the Buddha, I'm going to walk you through and help you to understand the teaching and how to actually apply it in your day-to-day life. Then after our lunch break, we're going to come back and I'm going to teach you what's called the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots. These are the 3 high-level problems that are in the mind. We're going to be talking about those problems, but then we're going to be discussing the solutions as well so that you can understand how to move your mind to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy that is the enlightened mental state. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way I start is I ease the mind into meditation with some chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along in. There's chanting sheets over there on the table that you're welcome to get. For those of you guys online, you can get this chanting sheet by going to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. Click on free books, and then down towards the bottom, you'll see the daily chanting sheet. These chants are something that today we use in order to cultivate awareness of mind and concentration, ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory because everything that he taught was oral, where he didn't write things down because the technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world. So they didn't write his teachings down until shortly after his death. So they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. So these chants, they're nothing mystical or magical. It's not a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. It's not even prayer or anything like that. The Buddha didn't teach those kinds of things. He used chanting solely to commit the teachings to memory. And if you see the actual chants here with the English translations, you see a lot of appreciation and admiration and gratitude and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think that the Buddha actually created these chants himself. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha doesn't walk around with arrogance and pride and ego and say, here, chant these things to me. Instead, his students, having learned how to move their mind from this anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state. And the Buddha didn't want anything from his students and didn't expect anything from them. So they, I suspect, had a lot of appreciation and gratitude for him, because today there's people that have a lot of respect and gratitude for him as well. So if you'd like to join along in the chants, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to be starting each meditation throughout our course with these chants, so you'll get plenty of practice to be able to practice them if you would like to practice them. After the chanting, I'm going to be giving some guidance on the meditation of how to actually meditate while we're actually meditating together. Then you're going to see that there's this period of quiet where we're just all meditating. Everybody here and everyone online will just be meditating together. And then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting, which you're also welcome to join in there if you like as well. So there's 4 different positions to meditate in. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking. And I teach these at different times in the various courses and retreats that I have. But most people are learning in the seated position. So the important thing is to make yourself comfortable. And that might include sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair. It's really up to you how you like to sit. There's not just one way to actually sit in meditation. Some people like to have some cushions under their rear to kind of soften their seat. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. You would like your legs to be lightly crossed so they're not real tight, because that would impede the circulation. So you can sit however you're comfortable, either with your legs on the mat or off the mat or any other combination that you like. It's not about everyone doing it the same way. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. So if this is comfortable, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people like to put their palms up. Some people like to put their hands in their lap. So you find whatever's comfortable for you. And if you're in a chair or maybe a sofa or a bench or a wheelchair or something like that, oftentimes people like to put their feet either flat on the floor or lightly crossed at the ankles. But you can see me, I'm sitting in a chair with my legs crossed, so you can really sit however you like. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the sternum up and the shoulders back in order to keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities. So you'd like your mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. It also helps you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose by having the sternum up and the shoulders back. So again, I'm going to chant to ease us into meditation, which you guys are welcome to join in on. Then I'll come back in with some guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa. Body and hands and arms comfortable. In the upper body, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาโพตังมะคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคคาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. So as I mentioned, the title of this course is Experiencing the Jhanas and the Four Stages of Enlightenment. And over the course of the next 5 days, I'm going to be sharing teachings with you that are going to help you understand the foundational teachings of the Buddha, but then also moving into describing these jhanas and these four stages of enlightenment, how to move into these actual phases of your development on the path to enlightenment. Our course is going to be from 9 a.m. in the morning till 3 p.m. each day. I start right at 9 a.m. and we start with a meditation. This chanting meditation is what we're going to do each morning. Then after the meditation, I'll move into some kind of talk. And then from there, we'll have our lunch break, and then we'll end up finishing up right around 3 o'clock. So this is kind of a general idea of what the time frame of the course is. This is contact information for me if you guys need to contact me for any reason. If you're deciding to come to class or not deciding to come to class, it's up to you. You don't need to let me know that. You can just come and go as you please. This contact information is more for after the course, that you might be needing to contact me in order for continued support or something like that. So you'll have my information here to be able to help you. Then in terms of the way that our course is structured is that, like I mentioned, each morning that we have chanting and meditation to give you guys a chance to learn and develop your meditation practice with support. Then at 9:30 is where I move into some type of talk or a discussion. Some people refer to this as a Dhamma talk because the word Dhamma means teachings. So this is like a teachings talk or a talk on the teachings. We usually take a mid-morning break somewhere around 10:30 or 11. It kind of fluctuates depending on what we're talking about, where it gives you guys a chance to talk, spend time with each other, get to meet each other, use the restroom, get snacks, take a little walk, whatever it is you'd like to do. Maybe take a nap or some yoga or something like that. Totally up to you. Then we take a lunch generally around 12, sometimes a little bit later, sometimes a little bit earlier. It just depends what we're talking about. And we usually take an hour-and-a-half lunch break to give you guys plenty of time to rest and relax. You can go out and eat. You can come back here. If you like to hang out here, we leave the air conditioning on. Sometimes people like to take a little nap here. You might even see me doing that from time to time, having a little nap during the lunchtime. So feel free to use the space as you like. And I'll let you know each day when we're leaving, what time we're getting back together. We'll generally come back together around 1:30. And from there, we usually do meditation as well in the afternoon. And then there's some talk on the teachings. So you're going to see this kind of as we go. And we end up usually around 3. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, just depends on what we're actually talking about. So this is kind of the general structure of the course. This course is based on this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is the very first book of the book series, and each of the courses and retreats, they're based on certain aspects of the book. There's certain chapters. This particular course is based on chapter 3, 4, 5, 8, 11, 16, 17, 18, and 20. But there are courses and programs where I go chapter by chapter and cover every single chapter in this book. It's a 7-month program that meets each Sunday and Wednesday, and you guys are welcome to attend that here at the temple, or we live stream that as well, where I go chapter by chapter. And we just restarted this program, so it's very easy for you to join into it at this point if you'd like to. But people join this program at any point, but it's kind of nice to join it at the beginning, but you could actually join it in the middle or at the end. I've seen students do it in a number of different ways. But these are the chapters I'm going to be discussing. You can receive this book through PDF, through Kindle, or printed version. You can go to our website and download the PDF. You can take it and go print it yourself. You can get printed versions on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. We also have them here that you can just reimburse us for our printing cost, and then you can have your books. And then they even have Kindle versions on Amazon as well. It's the first book of this 13-book series, and there's certain things that are in the book that aren't in the classes, and there's certain things in the classes that aren't in the book. So a combination of the two, you'll be able to fully understand what it is that is being shared with you. So it's helpful to actually have access to this book. Then in terms of what you're going to be learning and topics in this course is the Eightfold Path. This is what we're going to be discussing this morning. This is the path for all humans to enlightenment. If you're going to get to enlightenment, you would need to know this inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. And if this is the first time that you're learning it from me with the words of the Buddha, that's wonderful. And then you're just going to need to revisit it. And for some of you guys, you're actually revisiting this and you've learned this before. You really can't learn this enough because you really need to dial this into your life closer and closer, and this is what's actually going to produce the enlightened mental state. Then this afternoon, I'm going to be teaching you transforming the 3 poisons, craving, anger, and ignorance. This is where you're going to deepen your understanding of what's going on in the unenlightened mind and broaden it to really understand what's causing these experiences that you're having in your day-to-day life when you're experiencing stress and anxiety and frustration and agitation and guilt and shame and fear and all these other feelings. This is going to help you to be able to understand that, as well as the Eightfold Path. And it's going to teach you how to solve it as well. It's not just going to talk about the problems, but the solutions of how to fix it. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. There's no longer any of those discontent feelings like anger, frustration, or anything else in the mind at that point. Then tomorrow, I'm going to help you to understand the jhanas. This is where I'm going to explain these preliminary phases that the mind goes through as you're putting together the Eightfold Path really well. I'll explain to you what these are in detail, give you opportunity to ask any and all questions that you like, because it's helpful to know when your mind is in the jhanas, because at that point you start pivoting and you start shifting your focus more towards the 10 fetters, which we're also going to be talking about in this course. Then I'm going to explain to you the 4 stages of enlightenment, helping you understand what those are and what you'll be experiencing as your mind's moving through those 4 stages of enlightenment. I'll be explaining to you the 10 fetters. These are the 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind, and this is what you're working to uproot out of the mind in order to experience the enlightened mental state. So I'm going to help you to understand what those are and how to actually eliminate them. Then we're going to be talking about concentration and developing this singleness of mind, because you need this in order to fully apply the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. You're going to need to hone the mind. Essentially, that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're honing the mind and you're starting to perform optimally, where you see more focus and clarity coming into your mind. So there's certain tools and techniques of how to actually hone your mind and get your mind to be more focused and concentrated. Then I'm going to teach you about the ego, what that is, and how to actually eliminate it. This is something that takes many, many years to actually eliminate. So it's really helpful to learn it early on so that you can understand what it is, and then the tools and techniques techniques of how to eradicate it from the mind. Because as long as the mind has ego, the mind's not going to be able to experience enlightenment. So you're going to need to learn how to eliminate this, because it's kind of like walking around with pride and boastfulness and arrogance. And when people experience that from you, they'll just kind of push you aside because they're not interested in being around that. So you can actually dissolve this and eliminate it, where you just see yourself as being equal and humble to all beings. Then I'm going to help you to understand the evolution of our consciousness and how we've been moving from the animal realm into this human realm, because this actually helps you to understand some of the animalistic instincts that we have in the animal world, and that we retain those even though we're in the human existence and we're not animals, we're human beings. We tend to function like animals in the unenlightened state. And when you can see some of these animalistic instincts that we have in the unenlightened state, it actually helps you to shed those and become a better and better human being. So I'm going to help you to understand how to evolve beyond this animal consciousness into more and more of a human consciousness. Then I'm going to be teaching you about fear and how to eliminate your fear, because an enlightened being doesn't have any fears at all. So if there's any fears that you have in your mind, I'm going to teach you how to eliminate those out of your mind once and for all. Then there's a topic about God and helping you to understand this being, that some people have an aversion to this being and push this being away, or some people have a real affection towards this being. But maybe depending on what you've been taught, it could be hindering you from getting to enlightenment. If you've been taught that God controls the world, or that God punishes you and rewards you, or if you've been taught to kind of pray to God and ask for things and God is going to magically make those available for you, this is going to hinder you from being able to experience the growth and development on the path to enlightenment. Or if you hate God, this could hinder you as well. So you can actually get to enlightenment with a relationship with God or without one. It's really up to you. Whatever way you choose, I can help you, whether you would like to have a relationship with God or not. Your enlightenment isn't dependent on whether you have a relationship with God or not. God isn't the central focus of the teachings of the Buddha. Instead, you are the central focus of his teachings. He puts you in the center of his teachings because it's you that needs to learn and grow and develop. But having this understanding of this being God can really help you. So I'm going to share that with you and teaching you how to either have a relationship with this being or not and still get to enlightenment. And then I'm going to teach you the 5 hindrances. These are like obstructions or things that are blocking you from actually getting to enlightenment. So I'm going to teach you what those are and then how to eliminate them so you can remove these obstacles out of your way in getting to enlightenment. And then I'm going to teach you how to determine whether you've actually attained enlightenment or not. Not anyone's going to attain enlightenment in 5 days that we're here together this week. But when you're making your way closer and closer to enlightenment, you'd like to know when you've actually attained enlightenment, and you should be able to know that. By the time someone gets to enlightenment, they'll know that their mind's enlightened. So I'm going to explain to you how to know that your mind is actually enlightened. And then we're going to be learning different meditation practices: the breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, eliminating sexual cravings, and meditation to realize non-self. These are the 4 meditations that the Buddha taught during his lifetime. And these are the only 4 that somebody would actually need to be able to get to enlightenment. If you're first starting out, you might focus really closely on breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, but you're going to at least be able to learn these other ones because you might need those at some point in your journey on the path to enlightenment. And then you can meditate in the seated, lying, standing, or walking positions. These are options for you because your body can't be in the same position all the time. And then you're going to be learning about Buddhist chanting in terms of just kind of doing it together and practicing it. There's certain courses and programs that I teach the actual chanting itself, but here you're just going to get an opportunity to practice it. And then by the end of the course, I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your life and how to receive continued support in your journey to enlightenment, because you're going to need support beyond this actual course. So this is what you're going to be learning as part of this particular course. Okay, so I'm going to move into this talk about the Eightfold Path, but I'd like to just pause and see if you guys have any questions about the course itself. Is there anything you guys would like to ask about the course or any logistical stuff or anything like that? Yes, ma'am. Yes. So what I'm doing is I'm live streaming all the classes. And so if you go to YouTube or if you go to our Facebook page, you'll see it there. Our podcast, will have not this particular course, but it's going to have this same course I taught, I think it was in July sometime. I'm actually uploading that to our podcast now and kind of getting it ready so that it can be uploaded. So it's not this exact course, but it's the same content, but it's just a different iteration of it. So you can watch this if you like. And while we're talking about logistical things, I meant to mention that there's a bathroom in the back of the room. You guys are welcome to use that at any point. We will take breaks, but feel free to use it as you like. It's really up to you. There's even bathrooms outside this classroom. If you go out to the parking lot, there's signs that'll take you around to the main bathrooms. You can use those if you like. And then we have refreshments that are provided by our students. Sometimes students bring in snacks and stuff like that and put it over there to share with you guys. So you're always welcome to help yourself with all of that. And as we go in our course, as you guys ask questions or things like that, if you could use the microphones here in the white bowl, this way the people online will be able to hear you, and we'll be able to hear you better here at the temple as well. All you need to do is get a microphone, press the gray button, wait for the lights to come on, and then hold it up to your chin. We'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. If we speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear us online. And then for those of you guys online, you can put your questions into the comment section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. And if you get one of these microphones, you can take it back to your seat because you're probably going to have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can share the microphones around. And we have plenty of them so that we can have them dispersed throughout the classroom. Okay, so this morning we're going to spend time talking about this Eightfold Path and helping you guys learn it so that you can understand this path to enlightenment. First, for those of you guys that haven't learned what enlightenment is, let me just talk just a little bit about that. There's actually classes that I teach for an hour and a half or so explaining what enlightenment is, and some of you guys have learned that, but some of you haven't. So let me just talk briefly about what enlightenment is. It's a mental state that you attain in this life through training of the mind. You don't believe a bunch of teachings and then hope that something good happens to you when you die. That's not what enlightenment is. What enlightenment is where you're learning and growing and developing, you're evolving to a better and better human being through training of your mind. As you're training your mind, you're uprooting certain causes and conditions that are producing the anger and sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings are being produced by certain things that are inside your mind. And you're going to be learning about what those things are and then how to actually eradicate them. Because when you're eliminating these things out of your mind, this is what's going to produce the peace, the calm, the serenity, and the contentedness with joy. As long as you have these pollutions in the mind, your mind's going to be hindered from experiencing these enlightened mental qualities. Not only is the mind peaceful and joyful, but you're going to notice focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory coming into the mind because your mind has uprooted these pollutions, so it's starting to perform optimally. You're going to notice that your personal and professional relationships are really improving and really blossoming because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships any longer. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing that. So this enlightened mental state is a permanent mental state that you attain in this life through training of the mind. And in order to do that, you need to cultivate wisdom. You can't just believe your way to enlightenment. Essentially, what the Buddha discovered is these 10 individual things that are causing the mind to experience the continued anger and frustration and all those other discontent feelings over and over and over again. But then he also discovered the tools and techniques of how to eliminate these out of the mind. And that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're learning about these tools and techniques of how to eliminate these pollutions. You need to learn about the problems and the pollutions, but then you need to learn about the solution to that as well. And what you're doing when we talk about awakening to enlightenment is you're cultivating wisdom. You can't believe your way to enlightenment. And what you're cultivating wisdom about is the natural laws of existence. That when you understand the natural world around you and how the world is constructed in these natural laws, you'll be able to navigate the world more peacefully peacefully. So when you're learning the teachings, you don't believe his teachings. You learn them, examine them, investigate them. You reflect on them to independently verify them. And then you practice the teachings, integrating them into your life on a day-to-day basis. And this is what's going to uproot these pollutions out of the mind. So when you're awakening to the wisdom of these natural laws, you're going to naturally make wiser decisions in the world as you navigate the world. But when we lack wisdom of these natural laws, we'll struggle and we'll have difficulties. That's where the stress and anxiety is coming from. That's the anger and the frustration, the guilt and the shame and the fear and all these other discontent feelings. It's the mind struggling because there's certain wisdom that you haven't cultivated yet. But when you cultivate this wisdom and you train your mind, you can awaken where now you don't have those discontent feelings anymore. And this is a gradual process. It's a gradual learning, gradual practice, and then you gradually improve and gradually see the progress in your mind. So through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, you'll see that the qualities of enlightenment start shining through more and more. So when you're learning in a classroom like this, you really need to listen with eager ears. It's not something that's passive. You're not just sitting back and just hoping that something good happens for you. You need to actively be involved in your learning, because you're the one who's going to be able to make decisions to get to enlightenment. I can't give you enlightenment, and nobody else can give you enlightenment. You have to actively work your way towards it. And that's where you need to actively learn and grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. So as you guys have questions or interest to learn, or you're not understanding something that I teach, feel free to ask questions. You need to be able to ask questions where you don't understand things. And if you're in a classroom where there's certain things that are being shared that are different than what you currently understand, this is really helpful for you. Because if you know you're experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and those other feelings right now, then there's certain wisdom that you don't have. That's why those feelings are being experienced. So if you are in a classroom where everything that is being shared is what you already know, then you're in the wrong place, because you're not growing, you're not developing. But if you're hearing things that are different than what you currently understand about the world, and this is an opportunity for you to then ask questions and get clarity and understand, because now you can grow and you can develop, you can cultivate more wisdom. So I'm sure that when I'm sharing with you this week, there's going to be plenty of things that you're maybe not understanding, or maybe you've learned somewhere else and you don't understand how what I'm sharing is different than what you've learned somewhere else. And that's an opportunity for growth. So ask questions when you hear those kinds of things, and let me know what you're having challenges to understand or what's not clear. Or maybe if you're seeing something that's different than what you saw in someone else's book or at some retreat or something, I'll help you to understand why I teach what I teach. Because what I teach is based on the original words of the Buddha. And there's very few people in the world that teach based on the original words of the Buddha. So oftentimes what you're seeing in books and in retreats and things like this is not actually the original teachings of the Buddha. And this can leave you confused, because you might go somewhere that is a temple, and there might even be ordained practitioners there wearing orange robes and shaving their hair and things like this, or people wearing white and shaving their hair and teaching things that may or may not actually be the original words of the Buddha. So everything that I teach you, I can explain to you why, and I can show you in the original words of the Buddha of why I'm teaching what I'm actually teaching. So where you're seeing conflicts, you're seeing differences, or you're not understanding, just let me know, and I'm more than pleased to be able to explain it to you in detail until you actually understand and you're able to get it. So feel free to ask any and all questions, and don't believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything whatsoever, because belief isn't going to lead to wisdom. When you believe something, you're just believing it because either someone convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. In order to awaken to enlightenment, you need to get to wisdom. And the way you get to wisdom is through not believing anything. You need to examine and investigate teachings through learning them. You need to reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you need to practice them, integrating them into your life. And that's where you'll see the wisdom, and you'll see your mind will gradually awaken. So I'm going to show you how to do that as I get started here and sharing with you the Eightfold Path. This Eightfold Path is 8 individual steps that the Buddha taught that is going to lead to your enlightenment. And I'm going to use the words of the Buddha to teach you each individual step. This is organized into the wisdom section, the moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section. It starts with right view, and then it goes to right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. You can essentially look at this as like 8 individual dials that you're tweaking. Whereas if you had a speaker system, you would have these 8 dials that you would tweak and try to get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. And it's the same thing that is true about your mind, that you can tweak these 8 dials in your life, and you'll see that the mind performs better and better. And this is how you actually enhance the quality of your mind and your life as well. The Buddha is teaching you the natural laws of existence through this Eightfold Path. He's showing you this cause and effect, or this action and result, certain decisions that you can make, certain wisdom that you cultivate that is going to lead to more and more wholesome results in your life. So it starts with this right view, and I'm going to help you to understand each one of these over the course of the entire morning. And then we'll take a mid-morning break when we get to that point. So here's the words of the Buddha on right view, the very first step of the Eightfold Path. He says, "In what, monks, is right view? It is, monks, the wisdom of discontentedness, the wisdom of the cause of discontentedness, the wisdom of the elimination of discontentedness, and the wisdom of the way of practice leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is called right view." So here what the Buddha is doing in the Eightfold Path is he's pointing to another teaching, because the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that other teachings integrate into. So here he's pointing to something called the Four Noble Truths, and he's saying that is right view. And then you would need to learn the Four Noble Truths in order to understand what right view is. So underneath of this line here, I've put the top section of the Four Noble Truths so that you can build confidence that what the Buddha is talking about in right view is the Four Noble Truths. You can see the connection between the two of these teachings, that he's pointing to the Four Noble Truths as part of right view. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you the Four Noble Truths in a way that you can actually understand this. We're going to start with the 3 universal truths, because in order to understand the Four Noble Truths, you need to understand the 3 universal truths. We refer to these as truths because the Buddha knows that they're true. I know that they're true. Other people know that they're true, but you need to know that they're true in order to be able to make progress on the path. What the Buddha is doing here is he's explaining to you the way the world is. His teachings don't explain to you the way the world should be. And if you follow rules and commandments, or if you do rituals and ceremonies, your life's going to become better. That's not the way that the Buddha taught. He didn't teach these rules and commandments for the entire world to follow. And if everybody follows these, the world will become a better place. Instead, he's teaching you the way the world is. And by understanding the way the world is, you'll navigate the world with that wisdom more readily. So I'll explain to you how this works, where you can learn, you can reflect, to independently verify, and you can practice. And this is where you need to be an active learner to be able to discover these truths and see that they actually are true. So this first universal truth of impermanence, I'll explain to you what it is and help you to understand it, then reflect on it, and then we'll go from there. Okay? So this universal truth of impermanence, the intellectual learning part of this, is to understand that in the world, everything around you is constantly changing. It arises, there's change, and then there's fading away. These are called conditioned objects, where things are constantly changing, that there isn't this fixed state, that anything you see, anything you hear, anything you smell, anything that comes in contact with your tongue, like flavors, anything that comes in contact with the body, or anything that goes through your mind, like thoughts and ideas, these are all impermanent. They're constantly changing. They arise, they change, and they fade away. Okay, this is the universal truth of impermanence, explaining conditioned objects, that conditioned objects will arise, change, and fade away. There is something called unconditioned objects. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. Enlightenment is an unconditioned object, that by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is unconditioned, that the mental qualities of the enlightened mental state, they're permanent, right? Then the natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught, these are unconditioned as well. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. And this is why his teachings are timeless, that what he talked about 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today as it was 2,500 years ago, because he's describing these natural laws and they haven't actually changed. The same wisdom that you needed 2,500 years ago to get to enlightenment is the same wisdom that you need today in order to get to enlightenment, where he's helping you to understand the natural laws. And these are the two things that are unconditioned objects: enlightenment itself and the natural laws of existence. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. But everything else in the world that you see around you, it's all impermanent. Things that you see, hear, smell, taste, that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind. Okay, so this is a little bit of the learning, the intellectual part of starting to understand the universal truth of impermanence. But now you don't believe that. You need to see independently verifiable truth in order to know that this is a universal truth. So now you move into the reflection. You start looking in the world around you to determine whether this is a universal truth. Because if it's a truth, you should be able to independently verify it through your own reflection. So you look around the world and try to determine whether you can find something that is opposite of this. If you can disprove this, then this isn't an actual universal truth. So what you do is, I suggest you start with something that you're very familiar with. You're familiar with this body. So you can ask yourself, is this body permanent or is it impermanent? If the body's permanent, then that means it's stayed the same your entire life. It's never changed. If your body's impermanent, then that means it's constantly changing. So what would you say? Is this body permanent or is it impermanent? Josh says impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Is the body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, right? It's been constantly changing since conception. When the egg and the sperm came together, the body's constantly changing. We have teeth that grow in and then they fall out. And then we have new teeth that come in. Our hair grows. We cut it and then it grows some more. It changes colors. We lose our hair. We get a little extra fat here and there, maybe a lot of extra fat here and there. You get some moles and some pimples. You get wrinkles. You get gray hair. Your skin complexion changes. This is all change of the physical body. What about your relationships? Are your relationships permanent or impermanent? If they're permanent, you've had exactly the same people in your life, your entire life. If your relationships are impermanent, you've had people coming and going in and out of your life throughout your life. So are your relationships permanent or impermanent? Impermanent? What do you guys say? Impermanent? Impermanent? Your relationships are impermanent, right? People are coming and going. What about your bank account? Is your bank account permanent or impermanent? Very impermanent? Yeah, very impermanent, right? It goes up and down and up and down. Some of us goes up, up, up. Some of us goes down, down, down. That's constant change, right? What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? What do you say? It's impermanent, right? It's sunny, it's raining. Some places it's sleet, hail, snow, typhoons, all different kinds of things, constantly changing, right? When you walk down the street in Thailand, are the sidewalks permanent or impermanent? Definitely impermanent, right? They go up and down. Sometimes they got cracks in them. Some roads have sidewalks. Some roads don't have sidewalks, right? When you look around the temple, you probably see impermanence all around you, right? You see holes on the walls. You see marks on the walls. You see the floor tiles. They're different colors, different shape, different texture. We have a certain number of people in our class today. Tomorrow, there'll be a different number of people in the class. People will be coming and going. This is just constant change. So you can look around the world and see this everywhere. And if you're having trouble to do this, go around the world and look. Right? You look at the trees and you see green leaves in the tree, and then on the floor, you see the brown leaves. This is change. This is impermanence, right? You're walking down the street and everything's quite still. And the next thing you know, boom, here comes some wind, and you feel the wind up against your skin. This is impermanence. Right now, there's a certain amount of sound here or lack thereof. And then at some point, we'll hear some sound. We'll hear a car go by, or a motorbike, or an ambulance, or someone will honk their horn. This is all impermanence, constant change. Okay, so you need to be able to deeply soak this into the mind and be able to independently verify that, yes, this is true. Everything around you is constantly changing. Okay, this is a building block that's going to help you to understand the Four Noble Truths when we get to that. Then there's the universal truth of discontentedness. This universal truth is sometimes translated as suffering. I'll explain to you what the Buddha was teaching here, and then I'll explain to you why I don't teach it as suffering. So here, the original word in the original text is dukkha. And what the Buddha is describing here is what the unenlightened mind experiences. He's describing how the unenlightened mind has conditioned feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And I translate this as discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. He talks about this as conditioned feelings, that based on some condition, your mind is going to experience a feeling. And it's either going to be pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. He's essentially describing the unenlightened mind to you. So the unenlightened mind is going to experience things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. And it's based on some condition. So for example, if it's sunny outside, you might get happy, you might get excited. Or if your bank account balance is here, you might get happy, you might get excited, right? This is the pleasant feelings. Then there's the painful feelings. This is like the sadness, the anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. This is very painful for the mind to experience. And that's based on some condition. That maybe if you got happy because it was sunny outside, then when it started raining, you felt sad or annoyed or frustrated because that condition was not permanent. That condition that caused the happiness of the sun, that wasn't permanent. It was impermanent. So your feeling of happiness was also impermanent as well. So your mind moved from happiness to the sadness. And then there's these neither painful nor pleasant feelings. I put in here loneliness and boredom, but some people say that's very painful for them. So you could put that in the painful category. But shyness is a really good example of this, that it's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. Or if you were on public transportation and somebody came and sat next to you and you didn't know this person and maybe your body was touching their body, you might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. It's kind of like the mind's uncomfortable. It's kind of dissatisfied in this situation. This is the neither painful nor pleasant, right? And this is conditioned feelings. Essentially, the unenlightened mind is going up and down, that based on some condition, you're going to get happy. And now when that condition changes, your mind's going to be sad or angry or frustrated. And because none of these conditions are permanent, that means your happiness is not permanent in the unenlightened state. This is why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because your mind keeps basing its inner feelings on some condition. If I have a boyfriend or girlfriend, I'll be happy. Or if I have some certain amount of money, I'll be happy. If it's sunny outside, I'll be happy. If my mom and dad do this, I'll be happy. If my boss does this, I'll be happy. But then when all these things change, now your feelings change and your mind ends up in the sadness or the anger or the frustration. So this is describing the problem in the unenlightened mind, that it experiences this discontentedness, that the mind's not satisfied, it's not fulfilled, it's experiencing this unsatisfactoriness. Okay, so this is the unenlightened mind. And you can independently verify this, because remember, you need to independently verify everything, right? The way that you do this is you know that your mind is unenlightened. And the Buddha here is describing the unenlightened mind. So you can ask yourself, out of all the feelings that you've experienced in your entire life, is this what you're experiencing? Are you experiencing pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant? Is there any feeling that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories? And if that's the case, if you think that's the case, then when we get to questions, just let me know and we'll talk about that feeling. Because the enlightened mind is beyond all of this, that the enlightened mind isn't going up and down and up and down, that you're experiencing unconditioned happiness, unconditioned joy, where in the unenlightened state, you'll get happy because of something. And that means that when you're not getting that, you're going to be angry or sad or frustrated. But the enlightened mind, it's just happy no matter what. You wake up in the morning, you're already happy before you even see that it's sunny outside. And then if it starts raining, you can maintain your happiness. Your happiness isn't based on any particular condition. Whether your bank account balance is here or it's here, you're still happy. Your mind doesn't base its inner feelings on any condition. And this is where your mind gets beyond these conditional feelings. Okay? So then there's this universal truth of non-self. This is actually a solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. When we talk about the 10 fetters, we're going to be exploring this in more detail, because the very first fetter, or the very first pollution that the Buddha talks about in the 10 fetters, it's called personal existence view. This is where the mind is confused, it has misunderstanding, it has a lack of wisdom, it has this misperception. It thinks that this body is you, or this mind is you. So the mind clings to a self-image or a self-identity, and it thinks that this is you. And now when you're being perceived in the world a certain way, you'll feel happy. And when you're not being perceived that way, you'll feel angry or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. So I'll give you some examples here. That if you've ever spilled something on your clothing and you were maybe in a social situation, you might have felt embarrassed because the mind wanted to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you had this spaghetti sauce all over your clothing, or this chocolate ice cream or whatever it was, you weren't being perceived by others the way that your mind wanted to be perceived. You were clinging to this body, wanting it to look a certain way permanently. And now when other people were seeing this food spilled on your clothing, you didn't like that and your mind felt embarrassed during that situation. Or if you noticed a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair, or you started getting a little extra fat, you might have looked in the mirror and you might have been shaken up by that, and you might not have particularly cared for that. Or you might have been in the mirror looking at your hair and trying to get every little tiny hair in exactly the right spot before you go outside. Or you might have been putting on clothes and checking yourself out in the mirror, and you didn't quite look the way you wanted to look before you went outside. Maybe you were thinking in front of your closet, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to appear? And now I'll pick that special shirt or that special pair of pants in order to look a certain way when I go out into the world. And the mind can only feel comfortable when you have that right combination of clothing and jewelry and your hair being done a certain way. This might be what you experience at different times in your life. This is the personal existence view associated with the self-image, that the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now the mind, if it's getting what it wants, it'll be happy, where you're being perceived in a certain way based on your physical appearance. But then when you're not being perceived that way, you'll feel angry or frustrated or embarrassed or shy or some other discontent feeling. Okay, so this is associated with the self-image. But then there's also this self-identity that the unenlightened mind clings to because of the fetter of personal existence view. That the mind clings to things related to your culture, your ethnicity, your nationality, maybe your sexual orientation, your job or occupation, any number of things. Like, I am Mexican, or I am American, or I am Chinese, or I am Japanese, or I am Canadian, or I am Australian. Any of this I am. It can be about your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. And now when you cling to this identity, when your mind is being perceived the way you want to be perceived, or you're in that particular role, you'll feel good. But then when you're not, you'll feel like less of a person. So here's some examples to help you understand this. Let's just say you're in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you identify with, I am a boyfriend, or I am a girlfriend, or I am a husband, or I am a wife. And now when you're in that relationship, you feel great. You feel wonderful because that role that is intact, that's the way your mind is identifying, and now you're in that role. But then when you guys break up and now you're single, your mind doesn't identify with I am single. It identifies with I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. This is what the mind tends to do because it thinks that this is the way to solve the problem. Because when you're single, your mind is uncomfortable with that and it doesn't like that. And it feels like the way to solve the problem is hurry up and get back into another relationship. But the real problem is the personal existence view. That's what's causing the mind to feel the discontentedness and experience the discontentedness. Or say that you were maybe in a job or occupation. Maybe you were a police officer or a lawyer or a food server, a taxi driver or something like this. And when you were doing that job and your mind identified that way, you felt great. Maybe I am a police officer. But then maybe you got injured or you're retired or something like this and you're not doing that work anymore. And now when you're a food server, your mind is thinking, I am a police officer. And now you can't be comfortable in that role as a food server, where the mind really wants to be a police officer. And now that identity that the mind is holding on to, it really struggles. Or maybe you're outside and you hear people say, all police officers are lovely and kind and warm and gentle and friendly. And now you identify that way and it's like, wow, that feels great. But then it's only a matter of time before people say something degrading and disparaging about your job or occupation, about your nationality, about any number of things. And if you form your inner feelings based on this identity, now your mind's going to be shaken up. Because you could be at a restaurant and 2 tables over, they're degrading Mexicans, or they're degrading Chinese people, or Americans, or some other nationality that you identify with. And now you can't control what that person says and what that person does. But if your mind identifies with that's who you are as a person, you'll be shaken up during that period of time. You might be ready to fight, right? But if you clear this out of your mind and you realize non-self, where you realize that these things aren't who you are, then you can reside peaceful. Because when someone says all Americans are blah, 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 they're not talking about me because I am not American, right? This body was born on a land that we refer to as America, but the mind doesn't identify with I am American, right? So you can purge this out of your mind. You can clean this out of your mind by realizing non-self, realizing that this body is not you and this mind is not you. You can get to the point where you realize there is a body and there is a mind and it's come together for this existence, but this doesn't define who you are as a person. So now when you get wrinkles, when you get moles, when you get gray hair, when your body starts to change, you're okay with that because you understand this is part of life. This is impermanence. But if you cling to this body, wanting it to be permanent, or you cling to a certain self-identity in the mind, now those things are going to get shaken up because when those things change due to impermanence, you'll be shaken up by those things. Okay, so this is a little bit of an introduction to this universal truth of non-self and personal existence view, and helping you guys to understand this. Because people sometimes come to Thailand. They say that I am going to Thailand to find my true self. Right? I don't even know who I am anymore. I need to go find myself. They might go any number of places. They might go to India or Bhutan or China or any number of places. I need to go find myself, mom and dad. I don't know who I am anymore. And then they come here and they might be looking for themselves, but they don't find it. They never do because it doesn't exist. They might find new hobbies, new activities, new friends, new job or something like this. And they'll go back home and they'll be like, I found myself. I know who I am again. I understand. I know who I am. Maybe it took them a year or 2 years to do this. But then when they cling to that job or that occupation or hobbies or activities or their friends or family, they'll think I found myself. But then when all that stuff starts changing, they'll be right back in the same problem. I don't know who I am anymore because all that stuff has changed. So whenever you cling to something and try to hold on to it and say, this is who I am, when that thing changes, you'll be lost and confused, whether it's being a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, or even a parent, right? Your kids live at home with you for a period of time and you feel like, I'm a mom, I'm a dad. But then when they leave, you're confused. Like, oh my goodness, like what's going on here, right? My kids are gone. I feel like less of a person, right? So you need to be able to get to the point where you understand you fulfill these roles, but that's not who you are, right? So I'm fulfilling the role of a Buddhist teacher, but my mind doesn't identify with I am a Buddhist teacher. Because when people talk positively about that, you'd be happy. But then when people talk negatively, you'd be angry or sad because you're identifying with that's who you are. Okay, so you can independently verify this, because that was a little bit of the intellectual learning. And sometimes people understand it when I first talk about it, but sometimes they don't. So if you don't understand this yet, it's okay. You have plenty of time on your journey to enlightenment to learn it and investigate it more closely. But even at this beginning stage, you can independently verify that there is no self. And here's the way that you do it. There's 3 different things that you can do. You can think about yourself when you were a child, a teenager, early adulthood, and then now. How did you look at yourself, your character, your personality? Have you viewed yourself as being exactly the same through all those phases of life, or has it been constantly changing as a child, teenager, early adulthood, and then now, right? Has there been a permanent self, or have you viewed yourself differently during these time frames, right? This is one way to look at it. The next way is if your arm was amputated and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? Would you be less of a person if you only have one hand and one arm? Charlotte saying no. Pat saying no. Are you less of a person if you only have one hand or one arm? No, right? No, you're not, right? So intellectually, you understand that this body isn't you. But this is where the confusion comes in, the misunderstanding. Because when somebody says something degrading or disparaging about this body, you'll get angry or frustrated, right? So you understand intellectually that this body isn't you. Because if this body was you, and I asked you if you had an arm amputated, are you less of a person? You would say yes, because this body is me, I have less body, so therefore I'm less of a person. But nobody ever answers it that way. Everyone always says, yes, I'm not less of a person. I just have less use of a hand or an arm. So if this body is you, when your arm is gone, you would say, I'm less of a person. But nobody ever says that. They say, no, I'm not less of a person. So here's a third way that you can independently verify that there is no self and that this body isn't you and this mind isn't you. Point to yourself. Where are you? Can you point? Maybe all of you guys realize non-self already, right? Usually what people do is they point here. They'll say, I am here, or they'll say, I am here, right? So if you're pointing here, or you are thinking about pointing there, you got to look at what you're pointing to, okay? What you're pointing to is a shirt, and you need to ask yourself, is that who you are? Is this shirt you? If I took off my shirt and I held it up and I pointed to it, is that me? Is that who I am, this shirt? No? No? Okay, so we'll throw away the shirt. You're saying you're not that shirt. Okay? So now, point to you. Where are you? And someone might point again. You need to look at what you're pointing to. You're pointing to skin. Right? So if I took off the skin and I held that up, ask yourself, is that you? Is that who you are? That skin that you've got, is that you? Is that who you are? No, right? Okay, so let's throw that away. Where are you? Someone might point again. You've got bones, muscle tissue, organs, fluid. None of that stuff is you. But the mind's clinging to this, thinking that this is who you are, right? And this is where you'll get angry or frustrated when somebody says something about this body. But this body is constantly changing. You're not going to be permanently youthful, right? You're going to age. This body's going to deteriorate. That's part of the natural laws. It's the universal truth of impermanence, right? That's just the way it works, right? So this is how you can independently verify the universal truth of non-self. So you can independently verify each one of these so that you understand truth. And if you don't understand them 100% right now, it's okay. But you're going to need to get to the point where you deeply soak this into the mind and you reflect on it and you can independently verify it for yourself. Okay. So do you guys have any questions on any of these three universal truths? Remember, you guys can use the microphones here, or those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You guys warm? A little bit warm. No? Turn up the aircon a little bit. Okay, let me see if we have any questions. I don't see any here. Okay, looks like here's Mayu Lee. I think this is today's class. Is this today's class or is this yesterday's class? No, that was yesterday's class. Okay. I don't see today's class. It looks like it didn't make it to our YouTube or to our Facebook channel. So it's on our YouTube channel, but not on Facebook. For some reason, there's some impermanence with Facebook that it didn't post our live stream. Okay. All right. So you guys are understanding this to a certain degree. So now one more building block to help you understand before we talk about the Four Noble Truths. Here, this is a term that we use called craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectations. This is the grasping, the holding, the clinging. The mind is longing and yearning. It's chasing after the objects of its affection. The mind thinks that something external is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it. It thinks that if it can just get this thing, everything will be perfect. So the mind longs and yearns for these things. This is the craving, the desire, the attachment. It's like the mind thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide lasting satisfaction. It's like an unquenchable thirst that the mind chases and chases and chases. And if you get what you want, you get happy. And if you don't get what you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated. So if you've ever been in the mall and you were walking through the mall and you saw a pair of shoes and you were like, oh, new pair of shoes. Oh my goodness, those are going to look so good. I can't wait to get those. And you go into the store and you're like, I want those shoes. I want those shoes. Size 6, size 8, size 9, whatever it is. I want those shoes, right? The mind's longing, yearning for this. And if they have your shoes, great, you feel wonderful. But if they don't have your size, you might be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or you might have seen a certain piece of jewelry or a video game or a computer or a new phone or something like this, where your mind was longing, yearning for this thing, wanting this thing and feeling like, this is going to bring me such satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Your mind's pulling towards this thing, right? Okay, so this is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. It's happening inside the mind. It's not the object itself. It's the way the mind longs and yearns for the object. Okay, so now I'm going to teach you the Four Noble Truths. This is right view. This is where you can have a real breakthrough, because this is where you're going to understand the problem in your mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. You can understand what's actually causing these feelings, because how could you ever eliminate them to get to enlightenment if you didn't understand what was causing them? So I'm going to walk you through this again in a way that you can learn, reflect, and practice. So the first noble truth is explaining the problem that you experience in the unenlightened state. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. Those conditioned feelings, the pleasant ones, the painful ones, and the neither painful nor pleasant. So the mind's happy, excited, elated, but then it's angry and it's sad and it's frustrated, but then it's shy and resentful or some other feeling. It's feeling uncomfortable. This is the problem that is in the mind, these discontent feelings, that the mind's forming its inner feelings on some condition. This is the problem. Then the second noble truth is explaining the cause of this problem, that discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. Okay, so I'm going to explain this a few times and help you to understand it with examples. So the discontentedness, those conditioned feelings, the pleasant ones, painful ones, and neither painful nor pleasant, it's caused by craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way, the expectations, because the mind wants things to be permanent, but yet everything around you is impermanent. Okay, so here's some examples for you. Think back to that boyfriend or girlfriend that you first got together with. You guys were probably so happy at the beginning when you first got together, right? This person's showing you affection. They're interested in you. You're having conversations. You're going to the mall. You're going to the movies. You're going out to dinner. You're going to the park. You're having all this great time. You might even be having intimate contact to some level, right? And it feels so great, so pleasurable. But then over time, there's these expectations, certain things you want them to do and certain things they want you to do. And you can't fulfill their expectations all the time. And they can't fulfill your expectations all the time. So you guys maybe get angry and frustrated with each other. And then you decide to break up. Now you might be lonely. You might be bored. You might be missing this person. You might be angry or frustrated. It's not the love that's causing that. What's causing it is the mind is craving permanence. It's wanting this relationship to be permanent, when in reality, this relationship was always impermanent. You weren't going to be with this person permanently. Even if you guys were together for the rest of your life, more likely than not, one of you are going to die first. And now your mind isn't getting what it wants. So you might perceive that the pain that you're experiencing during this breakup is because you love this person or you care about this person. The love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. That's not what's causing the painful feelings. What's causing the painful feelings is the mind is holding on. It's wanting this relationship to be permanent. And now when the mind gets what it wants, which is this relationship, you'll feel happy. But then when you're not getting what you want, you'll feel angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. This can even happen with grandma and grandpa. When grandma and grandpa died, or mom or dad, or brothers or sisters, that the mind's holding on to this person, wanting them to be permanent. And then as long as they're alive, you might feel happy. But then when they die, you might be sorrowful or grieve or some other feeling. This is because the mind's holding on and craving permanence. And as long as the mind's getting what it wants, which is grandma and grandpa to be alive, you'll be just fine. But then when you're experiencing this impermanence, the mind doesn't understand. It doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence. It lacks that wisdom that because grandma and grandpa were born, they have to die. There's no way around that. Right? We all have to die. Or you might have been to a wedding where you or the people around you might have been grieving or sad, right? This is because of the craving for permanence. You see brothers and sisters going off in life with somebody else, and it's like, whoa, that's my brother, that's my sister, that's my cousin, right? That's my friend. They're going away with somebody else. I thought they were permanent, right? So now people might grieve at a wedding. Or if you've dropped your kids off at college or university, or maybe kindergarten, you or your children might have been crying when this was happening. You might have been sorrowful, right? Because the children were like, I thought mom and dad were permanent. Or the parents might have thought that way. They're holding on to their child and it's hard to let go, right? So when the mind's holding on and it's craving permanence, it will get happy when it gets what it wants, but it will get sad or angry or some other painful feeling when it's not getting what it wants. Okay, so this is around relationships, just a few examples. But here's another example. Say you have a brand new car, that you bought this brand new car. It's like the perfect car you've always wanted, and you saved all this money to be able to get it. And now you drive it off the parking lot of the dealer and you feel so proud of your new car. And people are even seeing you on the street and honking your horn like, hey, look at her. She's so successful. Look at him. He's so successful driving that new car. Wow, so beautiful. And you're driving so proud. You park your car at the store, you go inside, and then you come out and there's a scratch on your car. You might be frustrated. You might be angry or irritated or annoyed. It's not the scratch that's causing it. And it's not the person who scratched your car. That's not what's causing the mind to be frustrated. What's causing the mind to be frustrated is the mind's craving permanence. It's wanting this car to look permanently beautiful. Now, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, because when we walk through a parking lot, we aspire not to scratch anyone's car. But we don't live in a world like that. We don't live in a world where you're never going to experience impermanence in this car. This car, if it doesn't get scratched, the paint's going to fade. The upholstery is going to fade. It might get ripped or torn. The tires are going to need to be changed. The window washers are going to need to be changed. If your mind's craving permanence, when you're experiencing the change, then your mind doesn't like that. Because one of the ways to say that the mind craves permanence is to say that the mind does not like impermanence. When things are changing in your life, these are times that you might have been struggling the most. If you're changing your job, or you're changing your location where you live, if you're changing your relationships and things like this, anytime there's change in your life, if your mind is unawakened, you'll experience difficulties and struggles with these change, because the mind doesn't understand impermanence. It doesn't like change. So the mind is craving permanence in these situations. And what I'm explaining to you is that your mind is causing your own discontentedness. It's not other people. You might firmly believe that mom and dad are making you angry, or brothers or sisters are annoying you, or your neighbor is frustrating you, or your boss is getting on your nerves and stressing you out. But it's actually within your own mind that's causing this. And you can independently verify it. Here's how you do it. Take a recent situation where you've been angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling, and look at that situation with this fresh eyes. It might have been this morning, it might have been yesterday, it might have been last week, where you got frustrated, you got angry. You can see that there was something you wanted. And if you would have got what you wanted, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted, your mind was frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And if you have trouble seeing that, let me know, because I'll help you. I've had students say, "Hey, David, I went to work the other day and my house looked beautiful. I went to work, I came home, my wife had this craft project all over the house, and I got frustrated, I got annoyed. How did I cause this? How did my mind cause the frustration? She's the one who messed up the house. Didn't she cause it?" I'm like, nope, your mind's craving permanence. You wanted the house to look a certain way. You were craving this. You were expecting it. There was this permanence that your mind wanted. You wanted the house to look a certain way permanently, and it's just not possible. And when you came home and you experienced that impermanence, your mind didn't like it. And now you got frustrated. And your house can't look that way permanently. In this way that your wife has this craft project all over the house, that's not permanent either. She's going to put it away, right? And maybe you'll help her as well. Right? So this is how the mind sometimes doesn't see. It doesn't have the wisdom to understand that it's causing its own discontentedness. And what you'll tend to do when you lack wisdom of these Four Noble Truths is that when you're experiencing painful feelings, you'll tend to attribute those to external things. You might think this person or this situation is causing you to be angry, and you might have pushed people away out of your life. This is what the mind does, is that mind falsely thinks the problem is external, so you'll try to push this person or this situation out of your life. You might have done that with certain relationships. And if you've done that, you're not a bad person. You're not you don't have to think guilt or shame or anything like that. It's just what the mind does with its lack of wisdom. And you can see that that didn't solve the problem, because when you push that person out of your life, you still get annoyed. You still get frustrated. That's the problem, right? So this person isn't the cause of your anger and frustration, because if you push them out of your life, you'd be peaceful, right? Because if they were the real cause and you push them out of your life, you just solved your problem. But you didn't solve the problem, because you still get annoyed, you still get frustrated, you still get agitated. So you'll either push the person away or you'll push the situation away. This is called aversion, where the mind is averse to this situation, and it thinks that if I push it away, then it'll solve the problem. Or the next thing you might do when you falsely understand and you don't have this wisdom is when you're experiencing those painful feelings like anger and sadness and things like this, you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people in your intentions, your speech, in your actions. And this is where you'll damage your relationships. That through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile. And it's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal and trying to fear this individual to do things your way. And the mind thinks, if I can just get things my way, everything will be perfect. So let me growl and roar at this other human to try to get them to do things my way. And this doesn't work either, because you can't convince everybody in the world to do things your way through your growling and roaring. People will just choose to leave out of your life because they don't like the harshness and the bitterness and the hostility. You might have seen that you've had broken relationships because of that where you've been bitter and harsh and hostile, people chose to leave out of your life. Or the third thing you'll do when you don't understand the Four Noble Truths is you'll put your expectations on people. And you'll try to control them and try to force them to do things your way. You might have been in knockdown, drag-out arguments where you're trying to convince somebody that what they were doing was causing you to be angry and they had to stop doing what they were doing, or they had to do it your way. And you might have been arguing with them to the bitter end, right? And in all these situations, you can't live harmoniously with all beings. Because if you're pushing people away, if you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile, and you're putting your expectations on people, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to allow you to get to peace and joy. Because you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. Because the unenlightened mind, it can only be happy when it gets what it wants. So that means there's 8 billion people in the world, and you have to train all these people to do things your way. And that's not realistic. It's not possible, because you'd have to have a massive training program to get all these people to do things your way, right? Or you could just train one mind. That's the other option. Do you know whose mind you need to train? Charlotte's smiling. I think she knows. Whose mind do you need to train? Yourself, right? Your own mind, right? You can't go out in the world and train 8 billion people to do things our way. You have to be able to train your mind to understand this constant change in the world and not crave for things to be done any one particular way, right? Because there's multiple ways to do things. So this second noble truth is explaining the cause of the problem is craving, desire, attachment. And the way that you practice this, once you independently verify it, is now and forever. Whenever you're experiencing discontent feelings, don't look externally for the source of the problem. Look inward. As soon as you start looking externally towards other people, you're looking in the wrong place. You're not going to solve your problem that way. You need to look inside your own mind and be like, what am I craving? What does the mind want? And it's not getting, right? The mind's longing, yearning for something. It's not getting it. So therefore it's angry or sad or frustrated. And that's where the third noble truth comes in. Because once you understand what your mind is longing, yearning for, then you can eliminate it. You can eliminate that craving, desire, attachment. The elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. When you eliminate that longing, yearning, that chasing after things, that's where the mind will get to its peace and its joy. And you can independently verify this, because think back to that boyfriend or girlfriend that you were with. When you were holding on to them and you wanted them to be in your life, and you were longing, yearning and holding on, you were missing them, you were lonely, you were bored, you were frustrated, you were angry. But at some point you let go and you were like, you know what? If he wants to be with someone else, so be it. Or if she wants to move to another part of the world, so be it. And you let go. And when your mind let go, that's where your peacefulness came in. That's where your joy came back. Right? But as long as you were holding on and you were wanting them and they weren't in your life, then you were discontent. So the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating your craving, desire, attachment, where you're not chasing after things, but you're also not over here where you're indifferent either. You're gradually working towards things as a goal, as an objective or interest. And this is what your mind needs to learn how to do. It needs to learn how to no longer form its inner feelings based on these conditions. And that's where the fourth noble truth comes in. It's the Eightfold Path that is the complete perfect plan that's going to train your mind to be able to eliminate all your craving, desire, attachment. And when you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, that's what's going to produce the peace and the joy. So it's the Eightfold Path that is the complete perfect plan to helping you understand how to actually eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments. And it starts with right view. Right view is understanding that your own mind is causing these feelings, that it's craving, desire, attachment. If you have wrong view, you will blame other people for the feelings that you experience. And when you start blaming other people, you'll never solve that. because that's not the real problem. When you focus on the real problem and the real cause of the problem within your own mind, this is where you can actually get to a real solution. So that's why the Buddhist teachings start off with right view. Because if you don't understand that your own mind is causing these feelings, you'll never be able to eliminate them. So this is the very first teaching that the Buddha would share with all of his students when they first got started, is to understand right view. Right view is to understand your own mind is causing these feelings. Okay, so this is the first part. Now we're going to move into right intention. And it doesn't take as long to explain right intention. And then I'm going to open up for questions that you guys have about any of these things. Okay, so here's the words of the Buddha on right intention. In what, monks, is right intention? The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of harmlessness. This, monks, is called right intention. Okay, so there's three aspects of this. And some people refer to this as right thinking or right thought, because this is what you're doing, is you're cultivating certain thinking or thoughts in your mind, or an intention. What the intention of renunciation is where you have the willingness to let go and give up your unwholesomeness, your false ideas, your false beliefs, things like this. There's certain things that your mind's holding on to that you're going to need to let go of. If you didn't have the intention of renunciation where you're willing to let go, then you wouldn't ever be able to get to enlightenment. Because as long as you hold on to what you currently think about the world, you'll keep experiencing anger and sadness and frustration over and over and over again. But when you're willing to let those things go, that's where you can see the improvement to the condition of your mind. One of the very first false beliefs that you need to eliminate is the belief that somebody else is causing you to be angry, right? So you're not bringing in new beliefs in order to get rid of your current beliefs. That's not what the teachings of the Buddha are. Instead, you're bringing in wisdom. When you're independently verifying something and you see that it conflicts with what you've believed your whole life, you get rid of your beliefs, and now you have wisdom. You can know now and forever that your mind is causing these discontent feelings. That if you hold on to this belief that somebody else is causing them, you'll never actually fix it. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you have no beliefs whatsoever. You don't believe in anything, that you know the truth. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. This is why, like, when I found out that Santa Claus was not true, my mind was all shaken up. When I was 8 years old and my sister told me that mom and dad were eating the cookies and drinking the milk, I was like, whoa, what's going on here, right? I was all shaken up. Because when you have beliefs, your beliefs can shake, right? It'll shake up your mind because you believe these things and your whole world comes crashing down around you. But when you know the truth, nobody can ever convince you of anything otherwise. Your mind is stable and steady. It's unshakable. So you need to be able to get to that point through cultivation of wisdom, that you can see the truth, that there's certain unwholesome things that you need to eliminate out of your life, and there's certain false beliefs that you have, that you're going to need to have the intention of renunciation, of letting go. Essentially, you need to keep an open mind and bring in this new wisdom. Then there's the intention of non-ill will. What this is the intention of loving kindness or goodwill. Because what ill will is animosity and bitterness and harshness. And as long as you have the intention of ill will, you will be interested in causing harm to other beings. You'll have ill will towards them, anger and hatred. But when you cultivate the thinking or the thought or the intention of non-ill will, this means that you're cultivating goodwill towards all beings, where you have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Then there's the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to other beings. Because as long as you want to cause harm to others and you are causing harm to others, this harm is all going to come back to you. But when you cultivate the thinking or the intention or the thoughts of harmlessness, that means you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm. Because as long as you're causing harm to others, this harm is going to come back to you. And you would like to purge that out of your mind by cultivating the intention or the thinking or the thoughts of harmlessness, where you're disinterested in causing harm to others. Okay, so this is right intention. And now, just to kind of summarize what we've been talking about, is right view is the Four Noble Truths and accepting responsibility for your own feelings, intentions, your speech, and your actions. Essentially, what Four Noble Truths is teaching you is that your mind is causing your own discontent feelings. And it's because of craving, desire, attachment. You need to get to the point where you can see that so clearly that you can see in every situation where you've ever been angry, you've ever been frustrated, long into the past, your mind's been causing it yourself. And you've been firmly believing that it's other people that are causing this. Now, they could easily have been doing something unwise, but that's not what's causing your mind to be angry, right? Somebody could have easily been doing something that was unwise, but that's not what's causing you to be angry. It's the mind craving for everyone to do it a certain way, craving that permanence, having an expectation, a want, a longing, and a yearning. The mind is causing these feelings itself. And then the intention of renunciation is having the intention of renunciation where you're willing to let go and give up your false ideas, your false beliefs, your false opinions, that you're willing to let go of your unwholesomeness, that you have the intention of non-ill will or goodwill towards all beings, loving kindness, a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, and the intention of harmlessness where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. So this is the first two steps of the Eightfold Path. Any questions on either of these two steps?
I have a question about right view. I understand that it's my own perception on certain things. Like take my mom as example. Like I feel like get bothered why she's always anxious, and when she's out and about, like she's very oblivious about surroundings and stuff. And I can see that she's not happy, but she's not even realize it, and it triggers me a lot. But then I do understand it's kind of conditioned as if she's more chill and be like practice mindfulness more in day-to-day life, and then I assume she'll be more happy, and then I like to see that, and then when we spend time together I would enjoy it more, but at the same time, if I understand in my own head that's my own expectation causing this like anger and bitterness. Sometimes I just lash out on her, which I'm not proud of. But at the same time, if I solely focus on kind of change my mind and practice and realize that more, like I know that by now on theory, that's what the cause of it, and I will work harder on that. But at the same time, if I just do that part, I feel like I still hope my mom to get happier. Like there's nothing I should or I can do to change her behavior. I know I should accept her as the way that she is, but at the same time, I do wish she's like happier and better. So I don't know. I'm a bit conflicted on what's the best way to manage this.
So this is a craving, desire, attachment for mom to be happy. And when mom's happy, you're happy. And when mom's frustrated or angry or annoyed, you're frustrated, angry, or annoyed. Your mind is attached. You're attaching your feelings to mom. That whatever is going on with mom, you're going to feel a certain way about that. This is the longing, yearning that your mind has. So let me ask you a question. Are you happy all the time? No. Why? Because of impermanence, right? You have craving, desire, attachment in your mind. Your mind's going to change. You're not enlightened yet. An enlightened being will be happy all the time. So is mom enlightened? Mom's not enlightened, right? So she's going to experience sadness and frustration and agitation and annoyance and these different feelings because her mind is impermanent. She's got conditions in her mind that are causing these feelings. If she ever purifies her mind and gets to enlightenment, she'll be happy all the time. But you're not going to get to enlightenment as long as you're basing your feelings on mom, because mom would have to get the enlightenment first. And then you're like, okay, mom's happy, so now I'm going to be happy, right? This isn't going to work for you. So what you'd like to be able to do is not have this craving, desire, attachment, this longing, yearning, and wanting mom or expecting mom to be a certain way. But also, if you are over here on the other side, where you are indifferent and you could care less about what happens to mom, you're not going to be peaceful there either. So you need to be able to come to the middle, where when you see mom is upset, when you see she's frustrated, you might share a little help with her. This entire path is all about you improving the condition of your mind. But the Buddha teaches you that if there's people in your life that you think that will heed your advice, it's wise to kind of settle and establish them in wisdom and the Four Noble Truths and kind of help them along, right? So you're going to need to find a nice way to do this, a very humble way, a very skillful way. But fixing mom isn't what's going to fix your mind. You need to be able to get to the point where you can let go of wanting mom to be a certain way. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to learn how to do that. So it's not just this step. So far, we're just cultivating the wisdom of why the whole rest of the path is even important. That's what the Buddha is teaching you here, is this wisdom section. This is just teaching you why is it even important to work on your moral conduct and your mental discipline. But this part is what's going to create the real change in your life. So there isn't just one thing that you can do to train your mind, other than when you see your mind longing, yearning, and wanting mom to be a certain way, you need to restrain it and you need to pull it back and you need to say, no, that's not what's going to fix my frustration. Fixing mom isn't going to fix my frustration. I need to let go and realize that mom's going to be angry sometimes, and that's okay. Or mom's going to be annoyed or frustrated. But it's really this whole Eightfold Path that when you see it fully, that's what's going to help you to train your mind to get to the point where you can let go. Because right now, it's hard for you. And some of the hardest attachments to let go of are the people that's closest to you. So not only do you need to know the Eightfold Path and train your mind on this, but there's another class that I teach called How to Eliminate Attachment to Those Who Are Closest to Us. There's certain things that you need to do there too, because your parents, if you have children or a life partner, people like this that are really close to you, you'll have a hard time to let go of that attachment. And there's certain tools and techniques that you can use to let go of those attachments, but you got to start with this first. And then once you get this really well under your belt, then you can look at those other things as well. So it's going to be gradual training to help you eliminate this attachment to mom. But just understand that she's not the one. I think you know she's not the one who's causing your feelings to be a certain way. It's your craving of wanting mom to be a certain way. And this is where you can see there's no such thing as a wholesome craving. Sometimes people will tell you that there's wholesome cravings and desires and there's unwholesome cravings and desires. This isn't true, because aspiring for mom to be happy, that's a wonderful thing, right? If you have an aspiration for mom to be happy, but you need to be able to understand that you can't make mom happy. It's not you that's going to do that. It's mom that needs to be able to do that. So we can aspire for people to be well and to be happy. This is loving kindness and compassion, but it's when you're longing, yearning for it and wanting it that you're not going to be able to get it because they're unenlightened, right? So there's more for you to learn that's going to help you with all of this. Any other questions you guys have? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break here. It's basically 11 o'clock. It's about 5 minutes of. So why don't we take a break up to 11:15, and then when we come back, I'm going to continue our journey here with the Eightfold Path, moving into the moral conduct section and the mental discipline section. So have a break, rest yourself, have a bathroom, talk with each other, and we'll see you guys after break. Okay? So thank you guys for learning, and we'll see you guys afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to restart us with the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path, and then we're going to go into the mental discipline section. So just like before, if you guys have questions, just let me know, okay? So this moral conduct section, whenever you're learning moral conduct in the teachings of the Buddha, it's important to understand that he's teaching you about the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. He's not teaching you rules or commandments. That's not what he's teaching. He never taught that way. Instead, he's helping you to gain the wisdom of this natural law. And there's certain things that we're doing in our moral conduct in the unenlightened state that is harmful to others. And as long as we keep putting that out, that harm is going to come back to us. So he's teaching you this cause and effect, or this action and result, the results of your decisions, that it's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. And when you make decisions wisely, it's going to produce wholesome results or wholesome karma. And when you make decisions unwisely, it's going to produce unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. So each aspect of the moral conduct is to teach you how to not cause harm to other beings and to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. Because that's what you learned in the wisdom section, that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing the discontentedness in your mind, and it's unwise to cause harm to other beings. So now you're going to see in the moral conduct section that he's going to teach you how to ensure that you're eliminating your craving, desire, attachments, and that you're not causing harm to other beings. So here, with the first one, he's talking about right speech. Here he says, in what, monks, is right speech? Refraining from lying, refraining from slander, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from frivolous speech. This is called right speech. So he's talking about four things here that would be wise to eliminate from your practice: lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And all of these things are based in craving, desire, attachment. If you're doing any of these four things, there's a craving, desire, attachment that's motivating it. Because when you lie, there's something that the mind wants. And if it tells the truth, it's not going to get what it wants. So that's why we lie. Right? If you think back to when you were a little kid, maybe you're doing a lot of lying, there was something you wanted, and if you told the truth, you weren't going to get it. So you tried to lie in order to be able to get what you wanted. So when you eliminate your lying, then people can see you as dependable and trustworthy. But as long as you're lying, there's that underlying craving that's in there, and people are going to see you as being unreliable and undependable. And now it's going to put strain on your personal and professional relationships. And then there's slander or gossip. This is where you might be trying to damage somebody else's reputation. What the mind thinks in the unenlightened state is it has this craving to look good in front of other people. And now the mind thinks, if I can diminish others and I can degrade others, then I will look better. It's kind of like walking into a dark room and everybody's got a candle, and the mind thinks, if I put out everyone else's candle, my candle will shine brighter. But we actually lose less, we have less light when we put out everyone else's candle. So it doesn't actually help us to slander and gossip others. And if you've ever done that, you can see that when you turn your back, those people who you were gossiping and slandering with, they're probably gossiping and slandering about you when you've got your back turned. At the height of this, people can actually get murdered or injured, because if you've ever seen in the world where there's like investigative reporters that are investigating and, they're reporting on the news about some person, this person can end up dead. Right? Remember, the teachings of the Buddha, they're not explaining to you the way the world should be. They're explaining to you the way the world is. And if you gossip and slander people, that's harming their reputation, and they're going to want to harm you. Right? So the Buddha teaches you that it would be unwise to gossip and slander other people. He's showing you the natural laws of cause and effect, or action and result, how to eliminate your craving, but also how to eliminate harm to other beings. Then there's harsh speech. This is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. Whenever you're speaking harshly, you're being aggressive and hostile and bitter. This is because there's some craving. You want people to do something, and the mind thinks, if I can be harsh and bitter and hostile to them, then they'll do what I want, right? But this is just based in your own craving, and it's producing damage in your relationships. You would like to get to the point where you're gentle in the way that you speak with people, and this is going to produce the best results and the best relationships for you. So if you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, you will learn how to be able to speak more wisely, where you can be gentle with other people around you. Then there's frivolous speech. What this is where there's just like idle chatter or unpurposeful speech, where the mind is just talking like yada, 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 yada. If you've ever done this or you've ever been around somebody that does this, it's kind of like, oh my goodness, when is this person going to stop talking? It's not really a conversation. It's more like broadcasting. Like you might be broadcasting to the people around you, or you'd like to have a discussion. And that's what's going to promote the most harmonious relationships for you. So if there's a frivolous speech or idle chatter or unpurposeful, unbeneficial speech, this is coming from a craving to just talk and talk and talk and talk. And you would like to be able to restrain the mind from that. So this is the top level of right speech. This is what the Buddha is talking about, that you should work on cleaning up first. And as you work on cleaning that up, then there's other teachings that plug into the Eightfold Path. And this is one of those, the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. This is what you would ultimately like to build up to, where you're speaking at the proper time. What you say is true, it's gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. This is how you would like to gradually build up your practice. What the Buddha is talking about speaking at the proper time is making sure that you're not interrupting people. You don't like it when people interrupt you. So if you went around interrupting people, it's going to put strain on your relationships. So you'd like to be sure that you're not interrupting people, because there's a craving there that the mind is longing, yearning, and it's wanting to just jump in and talk. It's not willing to be patient and wait its time. The other part of speaking at the proper time is making sure that it's the proper time for your mind. That if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're agitated, if you're annoyed, this isn't the proper time for you to be able to speak. So if you spoke to your life partner, or your children, or your friends or family, and it wasn't the proper time for you to speak, you might have been angry or frustrated or agitated. You can see that it didn't produce wholesome results for you. And then the other part of speaking at the proper time is making sure that it's the proper time for the person you're speaking to. If the person you're speaking to is angry or frustrated or agitated, it's not the proper time to be speaking. And it's better to refrain your mind from being able to speak in that time. Or like say you got a notice in the mail that you haven't paid your rent and you've got 3 days to pay your rent, so you're going to be kicked out. Well, if your partner's coming home from work and right away you jump on them and start talking to them, this wouldn't be the proper time to speak. You'd like them to come in, put their bags down, get some water, get some food, relax a little bit, maybe 30 minutes, an hour into that. You say, hey, honey, is this a good time to talk? And they might say, sure, what do you got? And you're like, oh, we didn't pay our rent this month. We should probably do that or we're going to get kicked out. Or they might say, no, it's not a good time to talk. And you say, okay, no worries. We can talk another time. How about tomorrow? We'll talk sometime. Whereas if you have a craving and you want to talk right now, when they say no, they're not interested in talking, you'll be angry, you'll be frustrated. So you need to make sure you're speaking at the proper time so that you guys can have a great conversation and sort out whatever it is that you need to sort out. Then the second one here in the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, we already talked about that up top, that whatever we speak the truth. Because then we can be reliable, we can be dependable. If you've ever done a lot of lying before, then you know that your mind was kind of obsessively trying to figure out, what did you say to one person versus what did you say to the other person? And how could you ever get to peace and joy if your mind is obsessively trying to figure out, what did you say to one person versus what did you say to somebody else? And in some situations, they're going to discover your lies. And when they discover your lies, they're going to not see you as being trustworthy and dependable. So when that new project at work comes up or something like that, they're not going to turn to you as the person who they would like to do that project. So this could be a very career enhancing project, but they're going to look you over because they can't trust you. They don't see you as being reliable and dependable. But if you always speak the truth, then you'll see that things will go really well for you in those situations. You don't have to obsessively figure out what you said to one person versus the other. Then you would like to speak gentle. This is also covered in the top part of right speech, where you pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. You would like to make sure that you're speaking gently with your tone, tempo, and word choice. And English is an interesting language because in the Thai language, we have all kinds of ways to make sure that people know we're speaking kindly and gently and warmly. But in the English language, we don't have as many ways to do that. So you're really going to have to pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. We can use words like sir and ma'am, or thank you, or please, or things like this. And And this helps people to understand, like, hey, I'm being respectful with you. And this will put you on a different footing in those relationships, and you'll be able to have more harmonious relationships. Then they're speaking beneficially. This is like purposeful speech, that you're not just yada, 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 yada. It's not just about the topic that you're talking about. It's more about the method of the way that you communicate. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it beneficial? That's what you would ultimately like to get to. And then the fifth one here is speaking with a mind of loving kindness. This is active goodwill towards all beings. This is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. You're kind of wrapping your speech in this warmth and this love and this kindness. So this is what you would like to ultimately build up to, realizing that it's going to take time to gradually work towards this. In those situations where you have friends or family that you're attached to, you'll find it hardest to talk to them in this way, like your children or your life partner or people like this. You'll find it very difficult to speak in the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But that's where the mental discipline section comes in, that it's going to help you to be able to implement the moral conduct. But for now, we're just talking about this moral conduct with right speech. What we're really talking about here is developing something that in the Thai language is referred to as barami. This is a Thai word that you would like to establish barami. What that means is the one who people listen to. That the one who people listen to is the one who's speaking wisely. And this person can be influential in the community. So if you live in a Thai village, there's usually village elders who are really well known for being successful in life. It doesn't mean that they're financially successful. It means that they're successful in their relationships. And people know that if you need help with your career, your relationships, or something like this, go speak to the village elders. They're going to be able to help you. And people know, like, hey, they're speaking very wisely. They have great relationships. They're able to help you and help you to improve the way that you interact in the world. So you can be influential in your family, in your professional life, in your neighborhood, if you establish barami, the one who people listen to. And the way that you establish that is by using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech for an extended long-term period of time. If you speak like this for 1 week, you're not going to have barami yet. It's going to take time to build this up. It's going to take many months and many years for people to get used to you speaking wisely in all situations. And then you can be influential and helpful and beneficial in your family, in your professional life, in your neighborhood, and things like this. Okay, so this is right speech. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to it as right speech, but we might think about it as right communication, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, they only had one way of communicating, which was speech. But today, we have text messages, social media posts, we have emails, we have voice messages, we have many different ways of communicating. Because if you went into a job interview and you like knocked it out of the park and you did an amazing job and they're thinking about hiring you, but they got onto your social media and they saw that you were bitter and harsh and hostile, they're probably not going to hire you. So you would like to be sure that all your communication is using these 5 factors of well-spoken speech. So if you find yourself running over to your computer to pound out that email and you're so angry and frustrated, you probably should hit save instead of send. Right? Because when you're pounding on your keyboard with all that anger, that's not the proper time to be communicating. And if you hit save and come back a few hours later or a few days later and you look at it, you're like, you know what? That's not the best email to send, right? Because you've had time to calm down, right? So this is the kind of things that you would like to do, is not put this harshness and bitterness out into the world. Because if you do, it's just going to come back to you. Okay, so normally what I do is I go through the next 2 before I get to questions. I know you have a question. Yeah, over there on the bookshelf, there's remote controls. You guys can use those if you like. You can adjust it however you like. I have one up here, but I don't need to be the only one to control it, so you guys can make adjustments as you like. Yeah, you're welcome. You guys can do that anytime. Okay, so this is right communication or right speech. And in the book, you're going to see some more details about this. You're going to see a whole lot of details about right speech or right communication, because I go into a lot of detail about it, because you can do a lot of harm through your speech. And this is where you might be having a certain amount of challenges in your relationships. In the situations where you're learning the 5 factors of well-spoken speech and you're not yet practicing them 100%, you might decide to remember this, that if you can speak polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations, this is going to lead you in the right direction, where you need to know the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and that's what you would ultimately like to practice. But there's going to be some situations where you might not be able to remember 1 or 2 of the factors. So if you can remember to speak polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, this is what's going to really help you. Because just like I shared with you, these teachings are independently verifiable. You can walk yourself through any of these 4 aspects here, and you can see that when you've done these or other people have done them, it produced unwholesome results. The same thing with these 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Look at a recent conversation where it didn't go well, and you can see that you and or the other person wasn't practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. If you missed even one of these factors, there's the potential that the conversation didn't go well, that you weren't speaking at the proper time, you weren't speaking truthful, you weren't speaking gentle, you weren't speaking beneficially, and you weren't speaking with a mind of loving kindness. But conversely, you can independently verify these too through situations that have gone well for you. There are certain conversations where you were using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and those conversations went really well. Maybe at our break, when you guys were talking with each other, you were using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, maybe without even realizing it. Because remember, these natural laws affect you, whether you're aware of them or not. So in situations throughout your life where you've been practicing these 5 factors and been completely unaware of them, the conversation went really well for you because you were speaking at the proper time. What you said is true. It was gentle, it was beneficial, and it was with a mind of loving kindness. But you didn't know the 5 factors at that time, but it was still helping you. But now what you do is you consciously understand the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, so you start bringing them into your practice more and more, where you're now intentionally using them with your life partner, with your children, with your neighbors, with your boss, with other people around you. You can intentionally practice these and make sure you dial this in closer and closer and closer. Okay? So this is right speech. Then the Buddha teaches right action. This is all about ensuring that you're not causing harm through your bodily actions. Because if you're causing harm through your bodily actions, this harm that you're putting out, it's going to come back to you. And you would like to get to the point where you're not causing harm through your bodily actions. So the Buddha is giving you 3 really impactful bodily actions, but he's not giving you an exhaustive list. So here he's talking about killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. And in the foundational programs, I teach you the 5 precepts using the original words of the Buddha, which integrate into this part of the Eightfold Path. Here, he's just kind of talking very generally about these things, but in his teachings on the 5 precepts, he goes into detail about them, and he explains them really thoroughly. But he never gives you an exhaustive list of everything that could cause harm through your bodily actions, because he wouldn't be able to give you a list of every single thing. Like, for example, you probably know to not drag your suitcase through the aisle of a plane and run over people's feet and bump into their knees. You know that that's unwise. The Buddha would have never been able to explain that because planes didn't even exist during his lifetime. He doesn't say don't walk up to someone and punch them in the face, right? But you know that's unwise, because if you cause harm through your bodily actions, this harm is going to come back to you. Someone's probably going to punch you back, or they're going to pull out a knife or a gun, or their friends or family are going to attack you or something like this. So you'd like to be sure that you're not causing any harm through your bodily actions. And one of the things that I like to point out here when we're just looking at the Eightfold Path is the part where he says refraining from sexual misconduct. When you study the 5 precepts, you'll see what he describes as sexual misconduct. This is like having sex with minors, having sex with people outside of your existing relationships, having sex with someone against their will, like rape or something like that. And he describes sexual misconduct in detail. But it's helpful to understand that he never included same-gender relationships as part of sexual misconduct, because 2 loyal, loving, consenting adults having sex, they're not actually causing harm to anybody. If it's a male and a female choosing to have sex, okay, fine, it's up to them. They're having a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. If it's a male and a male or a female and a female, that's up to them, right? That they're not actually causing harm to anyone. So he didn't include this when he talked about sexual misconduct. And he was aware of it because you can see in his teachings where he talks about males and females who essentially don't identify with being a male or a female necessarily, that they don't think in that way, that their mind is of one gender and their body is of a different gender. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, then you understand that all the way from the beginning of time, there has never been a time in history where all males had sex with females, or all females had sex with males. It just has never existed. Ever since the beginning of humanity, it just hasn't existed. So the Buddha understood 2,500 years ago that same gender relationships were happening, and he never included it as sexual misconduct because he understood the natural law of karma, that there's no harm that's being caused here. And this is how wise he truly was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. That we have people today that don't even understand this, right? So this is how wise he actually really was. And you can see that, wow, this individual really understood the natural law of karma, right? So this is what he's teaching on right action, is to ensure that you're not causing harm through your bodily actions, okay? And these are just three really impactful ones. But you would like to make sure you're not causing any harm with your bodily actions in any way, okay? You'll see other ones that the Buddha talks about, like substances that cause heedlessness and gambling. He talks about all these different things, but he never gives you an exhaustive list. He just kind of points you in the direction to be able to see it for yourself. Then there's right livelihood. What right livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life in the world. That if you cause harm through the way you choose to sustain your life, this harm is going to come back to you. So here in the Eightfold Path, he just talks very generally. He says, in what, monks, is right livelihood? Here, monks, the noble disciple, having given up wrong livelihood, keeps himself by right livelihood. This is essentially pointing to his teachings on right livelihood. If you go to other parts of his teachings, he describes what right livelihood is. It's a livelihood that isn't causing harm to others. And here he's describing 5 individual livelihoods that would actually cause harm. Business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And you can actually take these and independently verify that if you did any of these, that it would cause harm and harm would come back to you. And this is where I usually use like substances that cause heedlessness. This is a great example to be able to see that, yes, the Buddha is indeed speaking the truth here. Because if I stood on the street corner and I sold cocaine or crystal methamphetamine or heroin into the community, I'm actually causing harm. These people are getting addicted to the substance. They're going out and robbing and murdering and doing different things in order to steal and get money in order to bring me money. And now it's causing harm in the community because people's minds are heedless. They're making unwise decisions. And because of that, me standing on the street corner, I can easily get beat up. I can get robbed. I can get murdered. This is all the harm that's coming to me from actually causing harm in the community. And I can get arrested too. In a lot of places, it's illegal to sell things like that on the street. And now you can have all kinds of harms that come to you as a result of that. So you can see this through the natural law of karma. But remember, the natural law of karma is a law that's functioning at a much higher level than the human laws. Because the human laws might say, yeah, it's illegal to sell cocaine and heroin and things like that. We're going to arrest you. And then you can see all those other things that are going to happen to you as a result of selling those illicit drugs on the corner as well. But a government, they might say, hey, you can go be a cashier at that liquor store. That's fine. We're not going to arrest you for that, right? But the human laws are imperfect because they're created by human beings and they're created and administered and enforced in a way that isn't necessarily fair to all beings. So if you maybe understand the natural law of karma, you might realize that it's unwise to actually work at that liquor store because these liquor stores is where people are probably going to rob you. They might beat you up. You might get murdered. People working in these places, you can experience those kinds of results, right? But at the very least, you're going to be dealing with intoxicated clientele. From time to time, people are going to be coming in. They're going to be drunk. They're going to be intoxicated. And how can you get to peace and joy when you're having to deal with this kind of thing on a day-to-day basis, right? So when you're learning the natural law of karma, it's important that, yes, you look at the human laws and see what they're doing, but the human laws are going to be imperfect. They're not going to match to the natural law of karma. So if you're practicing the natural law of karma, it's a much higher law that is functioning at a much higher level than what the governments are creating. In that way, if you're practicing the natural law of karma, you'll never have any issues with your government because you're going to be practicing at a much higher level than what they're having with their government laws. Okay, this other part of the right livelihood is how you perform your livelihood. The Buddha is teaching you how to be successful in your livelihood. And he talks about eliminating scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. Because these are things that are going to cause difficulties in your profession. What scheming is like being corrupt. So let's just say I was a politician. It's not one of those 5 livelihoods. It's not business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons, right? So I'm a politician now. But if I'm corrupt, if I'm scheming and I'm doing backhanded things, maybe 10 or 15 years into my career, people find out about that, and now I have difficulties getting reelected. And now how can I earn a living if I've based my career off of this, and now I can't get reelected? So he's teaching you how to be successful in your livelihood. What flattery is like having insincere comments where you're talking to people in ways just to get them to buy things from you or do the things the way that you want them to do it. So if you have a customer that walked in and you started trying to flatter them with any kind of insincere comments just to get them to purchase things, this isn't going to produce wholesome karma for you, where people are interested in purchasing from you regularly. If you've ever been in that situation, you were probably turned off from it. Like if you walked in and they were like, "Oh, you are so beautiful. Those earrings look so good on you. It goes so great with your shirt. I've got this beautiful handbag that's going to go wonderfully with that. Here, come take a look at it. You're going to really like it," right? This might just be like a insincere comment or flattery to be able to get you to purchase something from them, instead of just letting you shop and make your own decisions about what it is that you'd like to purchase, right? So if you're doing this kind of thing, people are going to be turned off by it, and you're going to be able to see that it doesn't produce wonderful results for you in your profession. What hinting is where you're not clear, you're not concise in the way that you're communicating in your profession. If we were all on a project team and we went into our boss's office and we needed to brief them on a project that we were working on, if we were clear and concise and precise about the way that we're talking, we're going to experience much more beneficial results. So we're not interested in just kind of hinting and beating around the bush and being unclear. We would like to be very clear and concise about the way we're communicating about the work that we're involved in. What belittling is where you're having degrading and diminishing speech about other beings in your livelihood, like slandering and belittling them and gossiping about them, degrading them and diminishing them, right? This would be like your coworkers, your business partners, even your competition. Sometimes people think that what they should do is degrade their competition because it makes them look better, right? But this isn't what you're interested in, because your customers are going to see that and they're not going to be interested in purchasing things from you. So you would like to get to a point where you're not belittling other people, whether it's your coworkers, your business partners, or your competition. And then what pursuing gain with gain is, this is where you're just out for the money, and that's all you care about. You don't really care about the job or occupation. You don't really care about the service or the product that you're selling. You're just out for the money. You're just collecting a paycheck. And if you've ever had that kind of job, you probably could see that you were unmotivated, you didn't have any enthusiasm with the job, you kind of dragged yourself to work each day. Even if you were making lots of money, you might have been making quite a bit of money, but you weren't really motivated in the work. So the Buddha is helping you to get to a point where you have enthusiasm and ambition with your work, that you thoroughly enjoy what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Whereas if you don't enjoy what you're doing in your livelihood, you're not going to have a very peaceful life. So he's helping you to create this ideal life for yourself where you're not causing harm to others and you're not causing harm through your livelihood, but also you've chosen a certain livelihood where you have ambition and motivation and enthusiasm about the work that you're doing. And this is what we refer to as the first fold of purification. That if you can ensure that you're not practicing one of those 5 livelihoods and you're practicing this, then you've reached the first fold of purification with your livelihood. But there's another level of purification beyond this that the Buddha teaches. It's in volume 12, chapter 14. So if you're in between jobs, or you're in a job you don't particularly care about, or you're looking to get a new job, you might look in volume 12, chapter 14, and you're going to see more detailed teachings about how to actually select a livelihood that you feel enthusiastic about and that you have ambition and motivation behind, because that's where you're going to be creating your ideal life for yourself, and you'll be able to go to work with enthusiasm each day. Okay, so this is the moral conduct section. We've got right speech, which is teaching you to not cause harm through any of your communication, that your communication should be harmless, whether it's emails, text messages, chats, whether it's social media or posts or anything like that. Then you would like to ensure you're not causing harm through your bodily actions, that your conduct and your actions are harmless, where you're not causing harm through your bodily actions. If you observe Thai people, when they walk through a crowd, they will even hold their loose clothing up against their body because they're not even interested in their loose clothing hitting up against somebody. This is how attentive some of them are to the way that they walk through a crowd. They will tend to kind of hold their clothing up against their body, even their bags and things like this. They're very attentive to making sure that they're not bumping into people. Think about when's the last time you just bumped into a Thai person, right? They're not going to do that. They're going to be very attentive to when they're walking through life and walking through society. They're going to be very aware of their body, right? So this is what you would like to be able to do. But of course, occasionally you're going to bump into somebody, right? And you might say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am," or "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." And that's how you clean that up and make sure that everything's good. And then you would like to select a livelihood where you're not sustaining your life off of causing harm to others, that your livelihood is harmless. And the Buddha is giving you those 5 livelihoods of business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And then ensuring that you're performing your livelihood without scheming, flattery, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain. So this is the moral conduct section. Any questions here on this? Yes, ma'am. Would you mind getting a microphone? Oh, you got one there. Perfect.
If I have amoebas and I put some for killings, it is correct? That is right action or not?
I'm sorry, what did you say? I didn't hear it 100%.
She has an amoeba infection, and then she takes antibiotics if considered to be killing.
Oh, okay. So in order to know whether you're killing something or not, you need to know what's called the 5 aggregates, or the 5 criteria, or the 5 elements, the 5 collections. These are the 5 things that make a living being a living being. They have physical form, they have feelings, they have perceptions, what's called volitional formations, and a consciousness. What physical form is the physical body. There's going to be a physical body. There's going to be feelings that being has, pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. There's going to be perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world. Then they're going to have volitional formations, which are choices and decisions. They're going to have free will. And then they're going to have a consciousness, or a mind. And if a being has those 5 things, they're a living being. So a bacteria or a virus, they don't have all 5 aggregates. They have physical form, but they don't have feelings, they don't have perceptions, they don't have volitional formations, and they don't have a consciousness. And this is why you're not really killing a bacteria, you're not actually killing a virus. What you're doing is you're eliminating it, that you're eliminating it from the body, right? And you can see that this is true because if you kill a living being, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you, unwholesome karma. But when you eliminate that bacteria or that virus from the body, it produces wholesome results for you, that this body is now healthy, right? So you can see the 5 aggregates and understand what those are, independently verify that a living being has these 5 aggregates, and then you can apply it, and you can see that a tree isn't a living being, a bacteria, a virus. These things are living beings. We're harvesting a plant, or we're eliminating a bacteria or virus. We're not actually killing these things because they're not living beings. And then you can see the karma, that there's no unwholesome karma by harvesting a tree. Now, we have learned that if we're going to harvest a tree, we need to plant 5 or 10, and that's really wise for us. But there's no harm in, picking an apple or a broccoli or something like this. We haven't caused any harm to this plant because it's not an actual living being. And the same thing is true for a virus or bacteria. Maybe you can translate later. And then if you have follow-up questions, you can let me know. Okay. All right. Anything else? Oh, Josh, sure. Go ahead, sir.
Where does right speech within our own thoughts come in?
Okay. So this is where you would like to cultivate wholesome mental states, which we're going to talk about next in the mental discipline. Because if you have unwholesome thoughts going through your own mind, where you're negative and degrading and disparaging to this being who you are, this isn't going to produce wholesome results in your life. So you would like to be able to get to that point where your internal dialogue, that you're also speaking to yourself with those 5 factors of well-spoken speech. It's pretty easy to speak to yourself at the right time. That's pretty easy, right? And speaking the truth, speaking gently, speaking beneficially, and with a mind of loving kindness, that your internal dialogue isn't hateful and vindictive. But when you have those fetters in your mind, which we're going to study in this course, like things like conceit, where the mind is measuring and comparing and judging other people, you're going to tend to judge yourself too. You're going to look at yourself in a negative and degrading way. But you can clear this up with loving kindness meditation, which you're going to learn in this course, and all the other aspects of the Eightfold Path. But you would like to get to that point where, you're being loving and kind to this being who you are as well.
This would fall under right effort, right?
Yeah, you're going to need to apply right effort to be able to clean up the mind. But then also this right speech, you can apply it to your own internal dialogue too, the way that you talk to yourself, even though there's no self. You talk to this being who you are. Yeah. You have a question? Yep.
Okay. How does one deal with, I guess, triggers, with everything that has to do with everything that you mentioned in a way? So I feel that you talked about the, I guess, sexual conduct in a way. So refrain from going to certain places, or refrain from working in certain places. But everybody has triggers from past or from other people. And then how does one deal with those?
The triggers that you're talking about, these are the cravings, desires, attachments that your mind's holding on to. And now you're being triggered. The mind is being triggered because of those cravings. And that's where the mental discipline is going to come in. You're going to see how to eliminate those cravings so that they don't exist. Because an enlightened being doesn't have any triggers. You can't trigger somebody into feeling a certain way. It's your own mind itself that is experiencing that. So if you have certain cravings where you want things to be a certain way, now when you're experiencing a certain situation, your craving is being triggered, that you want it this way, but somebody's doing it this way. And now the mind's getting angry or frustrated. So when you get rid of these cravings or you get rid of these triggers, then you can't be triggered any longer.
And what about triggers, again, of trauma?
Same thing. The mind is holding on and clinging to certain experiences, and now the craving, desire, attachment is getting triggered. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say, like when I was maybe 12 years old, I was beat up by someone in a green jacket. And now my mind is clinging to this experience. And I think everybody that wears a green jacket is out to hurt me. And now when I'm walking down the street and I see someone wearing a green jacket, I get scared and fearful because I see the green jacket. This is just the mind clinging to that experience. And now with the mind holding on, it thinks that everybody wearing a green jacket is going to harm me. So you you can train your mind to let that go and realize that that was an impermanent situation, and that's impermanence. And not everybody who wears a green jacket is out to harm you. So now when you see someone with a green jacket, you can understand like, hey, I don't need to be scared here. There's no fear that's in the mind because there's no craving or clinging to this experience. So sometimes people think that when they've had some unfortunate situation, that's trauma, and now they're never going to heal from that ever. Their mind's going to always be experiencing that. But that's just the lack of wisdom that their mind doesn't realize. You can let that stuff go. If you've been sexually abused or you've been physically abused or anything like that, your mind doesn't have to hold on to that. Your mind can actually be healed from that. And it's the next part of the Eightfold Path is going to teach you how to do this. The mental discipline section is going to teach you how to clear out the mind and no longer experience the cravings, desires, attachments that are triggering these emotions and feelings. So this moral conduct section, you wouldn't actually be able to practice it without the mental discipline section. You need the mental discipline section to be able to put the moral conduct into place. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have anything online here. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so let's go to the next part, which is the mental discipline section. Here I'm going to teach you right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Okay, so I'm going to use the words of the Buddha, and then I'm going to teach it to you. So here's the words of the Buddha on right effort. He says, "In what, monks, is right effort? Here, monks, a monk rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort." So here he's talking about 4 things that the mind needs to do. It needs to prevent unwholesome qualities from coming into the mind. Any unwholesome qualities that are currently in the mind, it needs to abandon those. Any wholesome qualities that are not currently in the mind, you need to bring those into the mind. And any wholesome qualities that are currently in the mind, you need to support those, encourage those. Don't allow them to fade away. Bring them to full growth and full perfection of development. So here I've got some examples that are going to help you to understand how to apply this in your day-to-day life. That, for example, the first one, preventing unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. There are certain unwholesome things that are currently not in your mind right now. An example is probably killing another human being. That's the farthest thing from your mind right now. And what the Buddha is teaching you is to prevent that from ever coming into the mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to prevent that from coming into the mind. And there's other unwholesome things that are not currently in your mind right now. And you would like to apply the effort to prevent those from ever coming into the mind. The second one is abandon unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind. There are certain unwholesome things that are currently in your mind because your mind's unenlightened. So you're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate those out of the mind. An example might be if you're in an existing relationship and you have a craving for sexual contact outside of that relationship. If that's in your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to abandon that, to eliminate that out of the mind, because it's going to cause difficulties and problems in your relationship. Or if you have anger or frustration or irritation that's coming up in your mind, that's an unwholesome quality. You're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate that out of your mind. Then we've got produce unarisen wholesome mental states to arise in the mind. There are certain wholesome qualities that are not currently in your mind that you're going to need to bring into the mind. An example might be something like generosity. You might find it very challenging to share with other people, where when you understand that generosity is part of the path to enlightenment, that when you're giving and sharing with others, this is training your mind to let go. And if you find it very hard to share with others, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this generosity into the mind so that you can give and share with others, where you just don't want things to always be self-satisfying for yourself. So this might be something you need to apply effort to bring into your mind. Or compassion. This is the concern for the misfortune of others, where if you're indifferent and you could care less about what happens to others in the world, your mind is lacking compassion. So that means you might need to bring this compassion into the mind because it's not currently there. So you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this wholesome quality into your mind. Then the fourth one is maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, or not allow them to fade away, and to work to increase their growth in the mind. Because there are certain wholesome qualities that you currently have in your mind, and you're going to need to support those, encourage them, don't allow them to fade away. So an example might be loving kindness, that you have probably a certain amount of loving kindness in your mind, where you have a genuine interest in seeing others be well. But it's not been brought to full growth and full perfection, because there's some situations where you get angry and you get bitter and you get harsh with people. So in those situations, you need to be able to see how to arise this loving kindness, that you apply the effort to bring this loving kindness into the mind more and more fully, that you support it, you encourage it, you don't allow it to fade away. And then there's something called sympathetic joy. This is the joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is like the opposite of jealousy or envy. So if you're noticing that in some situations that you're joyful for others' success, maybe someone tells you that they're going to Thailand and you're like, oh, that's wonderful. Have a good time. I was there last year. That was really fun. You're going to have a great time, right? But then when you're at work and maybe you apply for a promotion and somebody else applies for a promotion and they get the job and you don't, maybe you're envious and you're jealous of that, right? And this is where you can see that your sympathetic joy hasn't been brought to full growth and full perfection and full development. So you're going to need to apply the effort to support that, encourage it. Don't allow it to fade away. Okay, so these are the four right efforts that you you prevent unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. You prevent these unwholesome qualities from coming into the mind. Then any unwholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, you abandon those, you eliminate those out of the mind. Any wholesome qualities that are not currently in your mind, that you bring those into the mind. You bring those in to bring them into your mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to do that. Then any wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, you support those, encourage those, bring them to full growth and full perfection of development, not allowing them to fade away. So this is right effort, okay? These are just examples, by the way. The things that you currently don't have in your mind, or the things that you currently have in your mind, is going to be unique to you. So you're going to need to discern and figure out what are the wholesome qualities and what are the unwholesome qualities that need to either be brought into the mind or eliminated out of the mind. And that's where the next step is going to help you. You wouldn't be able to practice right effort without this next step of right mindfulness. Okay, so I'm going to read the words of the Buddha here, and then I'll teach it to you. The Buddha says, "In what, monks, is right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk resides, reflecting on body as body, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. This is called right mindfulness. Okay, so he's talking about 4 things here. These are referred to as the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and I'll explain those to you. But first, let me just talk about mindfulness in general. What mindfulness in general is awareness of mind. You would like to cultivate an awareness of your mind. That oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we don't have awareness of the mind. That you might not be aware of the thoughts and feelings that go through your mind. You're going to need to develop that, where you become aware of the thoughts and ideas and the feelings that are going on in your mind. Now, this word mindfulness has made its way into common culture, and you'll hear people use this word mindful all the time, but they may not be using it in the same way that the Buddha taught it. Someone might say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to the table? And what they're really saying is, can you carefully carry this glass of water to the table? That's the way that I hear most people using this word. But that's not the way that the Buddha used it. The way that he used it is awareness of mind, that you're going to need to be aware of what's going on within your own mind. Then, as you develop that for a few months, then you're going to ultimately need to develop what's called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is where you're aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. I'll explain to you what these are. What the bodily sensations are, it's not just your aches and pains and things like that. That's not what the Buddha is talking about. What he's teaching you is that there's this early warning system that before you get angry, before you get frustrated, or even those pleasant feelings, before you get a conditioned feeling, there's some bodily sensation that you're experiencing. This is like an early warning system alerting you that, hey, you're about to get angry. You're about to get frustrated. You're about to get irritated, right? And this is an opportunity for you to apply right effort and cut that off and let it go so that it doesn't actually come into the mind, right? You're not suppressing your thoughts here. What you're doing is you're eliminating it before it even becomes a feeling. You're not suppressing your feelings. You're eliminating it before it actually becomes a feeling. Because if you were taking a boat from like Australia to Indonesia, and you're out in the middle of the water, and this water starts flooding into your boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get this water out of your boat. But if you can prevent the water from ever coming into the boat, you've actually saved yourself a whole lot of trouble. So you'd like to prevent these conditioned feelings from coming into the mind. Because once the mind is angry, now you have to deal with that anger. So this bodily sensations is a way for your mind to be aware that you're about to get angry, you're about to get frustrated. So you might notice with something like anger that you have this tingling in the body rising up towards the chest. And you might have this tightening of the chest, some tightening of the throat. You might have some heat in your face or pressure in your skull. This is the early warning system alerting you, hey, you're about to get angry. You're about to get frustrated. So essentially, your mind is about to form a conditioned feeling, and it's alerting you. It's like, hey, I'm about to get a conditioned feeling here. I'm about to get angry. I'm about to get frustrated. I'm about to get shy or annoyed or lonely or bored or even happy or excited. And you have an opportunity to say, nope, not going to let you do that. I'm going to apply right effort. Nope, not going to let you do that. You're essentially rewiring the mind, because if you allow the mind to form the feeling, then the mind is staying wired that way. That when you experience some contact, you're getting triggered, and now the mind experiences that feeling, and it keeps experiencing that over and over. It keeps dwelling in that experience because the mind is continuing to be wired to have conditioned feelings. But when your mind's about to get the conditioned feeling, if you can notice the bodily sensation and cut it off and let it go there, then your mind will essentially get rewired over time. That if you do that enough times, your mind will eventually not get conditioned feelings based on certain cravings, desires, attachments, right? So you're not suppressing your feelings here. You're actually cutting them off and letting them go before it actually becomes a feeling. But it's going to take you time to develop your mindfulness and to be able to cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. You can't walk out of here and just implement this perfectly today, right? It's going to take you many months and years to develop this, where you can catch it as a bodily sensation each time. So you will experience some conditioned feelings between now and enlightenment. You're going to experience some anger and sadness and frustration. So when it moves from the bodily sensation and you didn't catch it, and it actually forms a feeling, you can cut it off and let it go there too. With your mindfulness and your awareness of mind, and you see the mind just got angry, you see the mind just got frustrated, cut it off and let it go. Because if you don't, it's going to then affect the condition of your mind. Have you ever been angry or grumpy or irritable for a few hours or a day or two or even a week or so? Of course you have, right? We all have, right? That's because you didn't understand this. You lacked the wisdom of this. You didn't cut it off as a bodily sensation. You didn't cut it off as a feeling, and it affected the condition of your mind. And then you went around being miserable for however long you were feeling miserable. And then the mind forms these mental objects. This is a deeply rooted container in the mind, where now in this example, it's ill will, where we weren't born with ill will. We actually formed it over time, that our cravings, desires, attachments, in some cases were getting fulfilled and we got happy, but in some cases they didn't get fulfilled and our anger and frustration started to arise. It was a bodily sensation. It became a feeling, it affected the condition of our mind, and then it formed this deeply rooted container in the mind of ill will. And now what the Buddha is teaching you is to essentially put a blockade at the bodily sensations and not allow the mind to experience these conditioned feelings. And over time, you will essentially rewire the mind. This is what you would like to ultimately do. The way this looks in practice is, say you're sitting there watching TV, the news comes on, and you see something on the news or you hear something on the news, and you feel the frustration starting to arise as a bodily sensation. Cut off the news, go for a walk, redirect the mind, apply right effort. Whereas if you sit there and continue to take in the news, the mind's going to form that anger. It's going to form that feeling. It's going to form that frustration, and now your mind's angry. Whereas if you can protect the mind with your mindfulness, it's like a guard. It's like guarding the mind. It's almost like a virus scanner on your computer that is kind of watching over your mind. In the virus scanner, whenever there's a virus that lands on your hard drive, it notices it, it quarantines it, it cleans it up, and it gets rid of it. So your mindfulness is the same way. It's just sitting there, watching over your mind. It's guarding your mind. And if at any point you see the bodily sensations coming, you cut it off and let it go. Get up and go get a glass of water. Go for a walk. Go for a bike ride. Go do something else. Don't allow your mind to dwell in that feeling or even form the feeling to begin with. Just cut it off and let it go. But it's going to take time to gradually do this. And eventually it'll get effortless, where you can do this effortlessly. Because if you allow the feeling to go from the bodily sensation into an actual feeling, now you've got a more significant problem to deal with. And if it lingers, now for a couple of hours or a couple of days, you're frustrated and agitated, now you've got an even bigger problem to deal with to get rid of that. And then it's going to form this mental object and feed these mental objects that are in the mind. All these 10 fetters that we're going to be talking about in this class, those are all mental objects. The conceit, the ill will, the sensual desire, the personal existence view, all those things are mental objects. So you would like to uproot those and purify your mind. So that's why you're blocking this at the bodily sensations, and now you're going to clean up your mind and get rid of those impurities of the mental objects that are in the mind. Okay, so this is right mindfulness, having this general awareness of the mind, starting out there for a few months. That might be just where you hang out for a while, just building general awareness of the mind, but then more specifically developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the thing that's going to help you with this is the next step, right concentration. Here, the Buddha is talking about the jhanas, and we're going to be discussing the jhanas tomorrow. We have a whole class on the jhanas, so we're going to actually be studying these words tomorrow. But for now, I'm just going to focus you on how to practice right concentration, because what he's talking about is the results of having put together the Eightfold Path really well, that your mind's going to start experiencing the jhanas. And just a little bit of a preview, these are enhanced qualities of mind that you'll be experiencing all throughout your day. And you're going to need these in order to be able to purify the mind and actually get to enlightenment. But what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how to actually practice right concentration, because we're going to talk about what the jhanas are and how to experience them tomorrow as part of our class. The way you practice right concentration is you develop a meditation practice and you practice singleness of mind. This is how you actually develop right concentration in the mind, where the breathing mindfulness meditation, when you're focused on the breath and the mind moves off the breath and you cut that off and let it go and bring the mind back to the breath, that's helping you develop concentration. And it's also helping you develop mindfulness or awareness of mind, where you're aware of the thoughts and ideas and the things that are going on in your mind. Okay, so you're going to need to build up this meditation practice, which is what I'm going to help you do in this course. And you'd ultimately like to build up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more. And this can be somewhat challenging for you when you're first getting started. So don't put any pressure on yourself. It can take 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to this type of practice, because there's certain things that are going on in your life right now that are maybe unbeneficial, and that you could clear those things out. Like maybe if you're searching social media for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, or other things like this, right? You might be able to bring that down to like an hour or so, or 30 minutes, and now you have a lot more time in your day. So you'd like to build up this meditation practice. Then you'd also like to practice singleness of mind, where you're doing just one thing at a time, where whenever you notice that your mind wanders, you cut that off and let it go, right? So say you're washing the dishes and you notice that your mind wanders. You would like to cut that off and bring it back to the dishes. Or if you're in a business meeting and you see your mind's wandering, you'd like to cut that off and bring your mind back to what it is that you're doing. You'd like to practice singleness of mind. Your mind can only do actually one thing at a time, but you might have been taught that you can multitask. This is something that some people teach, that your mind can actually do multiple things at one time, where you're not actually doing that. What you're doing is your mind is rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. That you might be doing this thing for 3 to 5 seconds, and then you're doing this thing for 3 to 5 seconds, you're doing this thing for 3 to 5 seconds. Your mind is just rapidly cycling amongst these things. And you're not doing any one of them very well, right? Because your mind is rapidly cycling. And then when you get home at the end of your day, you'll find it very hard to relax. You'll find that your mind is stressed and having anxiety. It's almost like a racehorse running around a track, and then when it goes to the barn, it has trouble calming down. It's like all hyped up, right? And that's what you might be doing with your mind. So your mind can only actually do one thing at a time, and you'd only ever like to allow it to do one thing at a time, where you're not rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And when you're practicing concentration, more and more your mind will develop more and more concentration. The way that I think about it is that if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you grinded this back and forth, initially that steel rod's going to bounce around a lot because there's no groove yet. But if you grind that steel rod back and forth enough, you're going to get a groove going. And then once you get in that groove, eventually, every once in a while, this steel rod will pop out, but you're going to know it. And you're going to bring it right back. But eventually, if you grind this steel rod enough, you'll get a deeper and deeper groove to the point where it'll never pop out because there's too deep of a groove there. So if you practice singleness of mind enough, eventually your mind will just always be concentrated and always be focused. So like right now, if you're thinking about lunch, you might decide, no, I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to listen to the class. I'm going to stay focused and attentive at what's going on in the class, right? You don't let your mind wander like that. You bring it back to what it is that you're doing, right? You like to do just one thing at a time. And more as you do this, your mind will just stay there all the time. It just will always be concentrated and focused, okay? So this is right concentration. So the summary here is making sure you understand right effort, that you need to take the initiative and have the willingness to cut off and let go of any unwholesomeness, and then cultivate wholesome qualities in the mind. And then your mindfulness is to develop awareness of mind in more specifically the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where you have awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects, realizing that's going to take you time to build that up. Then you'd like to build right concentration, where you're practicing your meditation and you're practicing singleness of mind in day-to-day life, not allowing your mind to wander. Realizing your mind will do this from time to time, but you'd like to practice where you're honing your mind. It's a full-time job to get to enlightenment, where you're actively practicing. Whether you're on the phone with your mom, you're at home watching TV, you need to be attentive to the mind and honing it and practicing and training it at all times. Okay, so this is the summary of the mental discipline section. So I've just walked you through wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. And you're going to need to revisit this more than one time. There's some students here that have been studying this multiple times with me because they're dialing it in closer and closer and closer. Each time you hear a different piece of it in a little bit different way. And then you realize like, whoa, I'm not doing that. I need to actually do that thing a little bit better, right? So this is what you would like to do, is dial this in closer and closer, because it's like that speaker system that you're trying to get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. You're looking to get a better and better quality performing mind. So this is how you get to enlightenment, is through the Eightfold Path. This is the complete perfect plan that's going to guide you to getting to enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on any aspect of this path? Yep, you have a question?
So I understand that it's a lot easier to cut it off, to be in terms of feeling, not let the feeling become a feeling, right? Be mindful, not let it become a feeling, and then just let it go. It's a lot harder to do when you're feeling in a way for somebody else. So for example, if somebody did something to me, I can try to shut it off and just say, this is them, it's not me, it's they're having a bad day, and just move on. The other day, I was out with my family, and this young girl who kind of repeatedly has been targeting my daughter, we ran into her at an outing, and she targeted my daughter again, and I reacted right away, because this is a little human being that is helpless, in a way. She's little, and somebody is attacking her. How do I, try to not react so much?
Sure. So was this like a verbal thing or a physical thing?
Physical.
Okay. So what got triggered there is your attachment to your daughter. You have a certain craving. You want something for your daughter, which is, of course, you want her to be safe. Whereas if you have a longing, yearning for her to be safe, then you're going to react in these situations. But if you are on the other side, where you could care less about what happens to your daughter, you're not going to experience peace and joy there either. So you'd like to be in the middle, where you make wise decisions to help your daughter learn how to be safe, because you can't be with her permanently. She needs to learn how to make these decisions. But also when you're with her, you can teach her and you can help her to do these things. And this is where, when you learn how to not have an attachment to your daughter, you'll be able to respond rather than react in these situations. And the response might be that you just take her hand and you guide her away, and you kind of walk away from this person. That could be an actual response, because this person is being aggressive physically because of what's going on in their mind. They have craving, anger, what we call ignorance, and you can't fix that. But you can teach your daughter, when someone's being aggressive with you, to walk away. And that's a good response to maintain your safety. And now, if you do that in a calm way, this will help you to be relaxed. Where when you have a craving, in attachment to your daughter, you'll find it hard to be calm, and you will react rather than respond. So you need to get this whole Eightfold Path underway, and you're just starting to learn it, where you practice the meditation, you practice the mindfulness, you practice eliminating craving, desire, attachment. But then, just like I was talking with Charlotte, there are certain things for the people who are closest to you, that those are the hard attachments to get rid of. This path to enlightenment, it's almost like an onion, where the outer layers peel off really easy, but there's these core things in the middle that's harder to peel away. Your attachment to your life partner, to your children, to your parents, these are the harder ones to let go of. And when you were talking with me the other day and explaining how you moved from the USA to Thailand, and you were saying, oh, that was a little bit hard for my children to leave their grandparents and stuff like that, that's what I was mentioning, like, this is actually really good for them to train their mind to let go. So your mind's going to need to go through that process of letting go, but you don't get to the point where you're all the way to the other side, where you could care less about what's happening. You just let go of the craving and the wanting of your daughter to experience a certain thing. But instead, you just teach her wisdom of how to make wise decisions and realize that she is going to experience some of these things. It happened to my son too. He was kicked in the privates many times in school. He was hit. He was slapped. He was these kinds of things. And I needed to teach him how to handle each one of those situations. But then also, we talked to the principal at the school, and we did that calmly and respectfully. And then it turned out very well. Whereas if we were bitter and harsh and hostile because our craving was being triggered, then it wouldn't have turned out so well. So the Buddha is teaching you how to maintain your calmness and composure so that in any one given situation, you can make wise decisions that's going to produce wholesome results. Because when your mind is uncalm, you're not going to have mindfulness or awareness of mind. You're not going to have concentration, and you're not going to be able to access your wisdom and make wise decisions to then bring whatever situation it is to a close. So if I was in that situation, what I would have done is just reached over and gripped my son's hand and just calmly walked him away. And now when we got away, then I probably would have sat down and I would have a conversation with him and said, you see what happened there, right? Yeah. Well, what would you do in the future if you were around this and I wasn't with you? And he's probably going to say, I would walk away. Perfect. That's exactly what you're trying to do, because you can't control what other people do. All you can do is make wise decisions for yourself. And in your situation as a parent, your role is to impart wisdom with your child that they can make wise decisions, because you're not going to always be with them. And you need them to be able to understand how to deal with these situations. So you can be the example of showing how to keep your mind calm and move away. And then once you've done that, now make sure she's experienced the learning and she's cultivated the wisdom of how to best deal with this situation. Then you can be reassured that if you're there or not there, she can handle the situation. Mm-hmm. And this is just going to take you time to let go of that attachment so that you can stay calm in that situation. Those are hard attachments to let go of. My wife, who I helped and worked with, it took her a good 5 years to let go of her attachment to her son when I was actively working with her. But there were other things that we were doing too. So we can have a private conversation about this, as well as you, Charlotte. But I would encourage you guys to watch that class first, because I've recorded it, of how to eliminate attachment to those who are closest to you. Everybody needs to watch that, because that's the hardest one to let go of. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so speaking of lunch, it is 20 minutes to 1. And normally we take an hour and a half lunch. But could we take, can we take an hour lunch and come back at 1:45? Is that okay for you guys? If we come back at 1:45? Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop here. Thanking you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn these teachings. And I'll see you guys back at 1:45 if you'd like to learn transforming the mind of the 3 poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance. This is where we're going to go deeper and explain more of the problem. It's not just craving. There's other things that are causing issues here as well. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll perhaps see you back at 1:45. Okay? Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.